Right, good evening ladies and gentlemen. Apologies for being a couple of minutes late. Welcome to this evening's planning meeting. My name is Councillor White, John White, and I'm the chairman, and on my left I have the vice chairman, Councillor Heaney. The other councillors sitting on the legs of the table will be the ones that will debate and vote on the applications. And on my immediate left and right are the TDC officers, including Head of Planning and the committee solicitor. This is a formal committee meeting, and it's important that councillors can hear both the presentations and the debate, and therefore I would ask you to remain quiet and not interrupt the speakers. I do also give notice to a slight variation in tonight's agenda order, in that to help Alresford Parish Council, who have a meeting this evening, I have brought item A4 in to be the second application. So it'll be the one A1, the Lawford application, and then we'll take the Alresford application, which on your agenda is labelled number A4. Right, then we will move to the agenda and ask any apologies for absence or any substitutions.
Thank you, Chairman. Apologies for absence have been received from Councillors Everett and Hughes, and there are no substitutes for them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And then we turn to the minutes of the last meeting, which was the 4th of... Oh, that's tonight's meeting, so it was way back in November, actually. That surprised me, the 30th of November. Can I sign those as a true and correct record?
No.
Right. Is there anybody... I have a proposer and seconder, so I'll duly sign those. Which then leads us smartly on to the application A1, which is 16-00618. It's a full application, and it's at Lawford House, Bromley Road, Lawford. And turn to the officers. I have some queries straight away.
Sorry, a few declarations, I think. Sure, it's saying something.
Sorry?
Declarations, I think.
Declarations of interest. Well done, councillors, for spotting the deliberate error. So let's start. Well, I can see Councillor Scott is in the field.
Declare interest, Chairman, in this ward councillor for A4 application 16-01621 for land adjacent to Hawkins House, Hawkins Lane, Alresford. As District Council, I'm declaring interest in that application.
Thank you, Councillor Scott. And then going round the table, Councillor Fairley.
Thank you, Chair. I am ward councillor for items A8 and A9. I will be speaking against them tonight and then leaving the room. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Baker.
Thank you, Chairman. With regard to the first application, 16-00618 Lawford House, I'm a Lawford Parish Councillor. I'm also the ward member for Lawford, and the comments I made on the 30th of November at our last meeting still apply. I'm still not predetermined.
Thank you very much. And I also want to declare on the same application A1, as I am a member of the Tendring 100 Farmers Club, and they are mentioned in this debate, but I have no pecuniary interest.
And there's Paul over there, he wants to mention he's here.
Right, and I've seen a councillor has just come in, Councillor Honeywood.
Yes, Chairman. Right, do I need to declare an interest on here for item, whatever it is, item 8, which is Wellesley Road, which is in my ward, which I wish to speak against.
Right, thank you very much. No further declarations? No.
John.
Right. Councillor Holmes declaring because that particular item, which
Number-
is A8,
Number 8 Wellesley Road, I'm a
this
ward
is
councillor.
Wellesley.
A5, it's A5.
It's A5.
A5,
beg your pardon.
sorry.
Yes, it's number 8. Yes, thank you very much. Right, then we'll go back to A1, the Lawford House, Bromley Road, Lawford, and yes, ask Head of Planning to speak on same.
Thank you, Chair. As indicated in your agenda, this application was actually presented to committee at that last meeting on the 30th of November, and it was decided on that occasion to defer the decision to allow the applicants to address concerns that committee had, particularly about the setting of the listed building and the impact on trees, and there was one tree in particular that was fairly close to the listed building. So I will be fairly quick in going through the presentation because actually there's really been only one main change, and so all of the contextual slides remain as they were. So there's the application site, and there it is in its context in aerial view. There's the listed building, and then there's a number of photographs which give you a very good idea of the overall setting of the listed building and the application site. That was just to show the policy context. And here was the layout plan with the trees plotted. Now, this is where the real crux of the issue is. So this aerial view is as it was proposed, so with 9 dwellings. And then this one is as now proposed. So if I go back, you'll see there that there are, let me see if my pointer works. There was particular concern about the relationship of this house to the listed building and the fact that putting a house here meant the loss of a particular tree. The revised plan removes a dwelling from that location. The one that was here has sort of been moved a little bit, so it's been realigned, and the tree that I think was of particular interest to members can now be retained. Okay, and then that shows basically the same thing, but in a slightly different way. So it shows trees that can be protected and remain. But it's probably less clear, to be honest, than the layout plan. And then these are the perspective drawings as it was, and so it's this area that you need to focus on to see the change, and then with that dwelling removed, so it gives the sort of more of the open aspect to the front of the listed building. And those are the dwelling designs which we looked at in a bit more detail last time. Chair, that's all I really wanted to say on this one, but obviously happy to answer any questions that members have.
Thank you.
Linda McWilliams. Did you want me to remind? Who was there last time?
Right, yes. There were, I think, at least one councillor who didn't come on the site visit, so won't be able to vote on this. But however, Councillor McWilliams.
Thank you, Chairman. And I know that I was the instigator at the last meeting regarding my concerns with the way the design or the set of the plan was, and I really do appreciate the fact that there's been a good effort made there to try and restore it back to something more natural, and that being the case, I would like to actually move, I know that others will probably want to speak, but to move accepting that application.
Thank you very much. Councillor Heaney.
Well, I was another person who just thought that house was too near the front of the listed building, and I thought it impinged onto the listed building. But I'm very pleased to see it's been moved, and I'm quite happy to second Councillor Williams.
Councillor Holmes.
Sorry, could you take it back to the trees? The first one. Keep going. No, with all the trees rounded, in red.
Oh, okay.
That's it. That one now. You say that they took one house away, which was on the other side of this road, wasn't it?
Yeah.
That road that's coming in now.
Yeah. So in this,
So have they?
there's one house here, there and there, and then there's a gap left here.
So, but that was on the other side of the road, wasn't it? Or is that another one they've taken away?
It's another one.
That is another one. Okay, well, when we site visited, there was a hell of a lot of trees in the middle where that one house that's left is still there. There was a lot of trees there. I mean, if you take it back, you'll see, well, even looking at this one, these are all these red circles of trees, aren't they? You see, where you've got that, right, this was the side, this is Lawford House, isn't it? This was the side where they took one off over this side because the road was going the other side. Right, so they've now taken another one away, but where the trees are is that number 2 there. That's where the trees are all congested in there, and they're just going to pull them up and cut them down.
I don't know whether I can help, Councillor Holmes, but you are right. The original application was for 10 properties, and there was one the other side of the road. We didn't like it, the proposal that was in front of us, and we asked them to consider removing the house that you can see has now gone because it might have upset the view on the listed building. And also, and in my mind the most important thing, it left that lovely great oak tree.
Yeah, I know the one. The
so
first
that's
one.
now protected.
There was at least another big one right in the middle of that as well. I mean, another big tree. I don't know if there's any TPOs on them, is there? Sorry.
Please.
You're quite right, Councillor Holmes. There are other trees to be felled, so this alteration to the scheme doesn't mean that there won't be the loss of trees. But our landscape and tree officer has made a thorough visit to the site and considered the information provided by the applicants. There is a TPO, and we in fact served a provisional TPO which increased the number of trees to be protected and to include the vast majority of sites, even within the middle of the site, which I think are the trees you're referring to. But having had some discussions with the applicant and looking at their information in more detail, we revised that sort of back down again a little bit, if you like, because the trees that make the biggest impact in the overall setting of the listed building and the character of the area we considered to be the boundary trees plus a few of the really big specimens within the site. And the view is that this scheme does retain those trees of particular note. And I think at the last committee, the discussion really did focus around that one dwelling that was closest to the listed building and the loss of a particular oak as a result of that. And that was sort of what officers were tasked with, really, was to talk to the applicants about that particular relationship. So your officer's view is really the applicants have satisfied that, and although there will be some trees lost, the overall character will be retained and the impact on the listed building is relatively modest.
Okay, sorry, I bow to the wisdom of the tree officer. Thank you very much.
Any further comments? If there are no further comments, I have a proposal to accept as per the recommendations. I have a proposer and I have a seconder to approve this as per the conditions on the bottom of page 17 and over on 18. So I'm going to ask you to vote on that. Those in favour, please show. And those against? Right, yes. I'm not sure, but I think, Councillor Gray, you weren't on the site visit, were you? I think it was one. I'd have to check the minutes.
No, he was there.
Oh, he was there. In that case, I apologise. No. So in which case, it was definitely, it is approved. Right, and now we'll do the jump ahead and we'll go to item A4 on the agenda, which is for...
Page 85.
Thank you very much. Is page 85, I am told. And it is planning application number 16/01621 full. And it is land adjacent to Cockane's House, Cockane's Lane, Alresford. Please.
Thank you, Chairman. This application relates to the erection of a detached three-bedroom property adjacent to Cockane's House in Cockane's Lane, Alresford. The application, a similar application for a property, was refused by members back in September 2015 and subsequently dismissed on appeal. A previous application was also dismissed on appeal in 2014. This application comes back before members now due to a change in circumstances in the vicinity of the site in relation to the approval of two large housing developments, which I'll look at in a bit more detail a bit later in the presentation. So the application site is located to the south of Cockane's Lane. To the south is Cockane's House, to which this site used to form part of the curtilage. Directly to the west is a private access to which Cockane's House takes access, and to a pair of semi-detached properties further to the west. To southwest is Stable House, which is in a commercial use, and further to the west is Ivy Cottage. To the southeast and north of the site is areas of agricultural land to which the appeal decisions relate. The aerial image of the site shows the land largely laid to grass. To the northern boundary to Cockane's Lane are a number of protected trees, and also along the western boundary to the private access. If you look in west up Cockane's Lane, you can see the protected trees there fronting onto the lane itself. If you look in back east down Cockane's Lane, you can see the private access in the foreground there, with the protected trees to the frontage, and a mature hedge that runs along the boundary of the site to the private access. That's a view from Cockane's Lane. Looking through the site, you can see it's largely laid to grass with Cockane's House in the background there. These are neighbouring dwellings situated on the western side of the private access. This is the site boundary to the access, and you can also see the access to Cockane's House in the background there. A small section of this hedgerow will be removed to facilitate vehicular access into the site. And this is the neighbouring dwelling at Cockane's House, which will be approximately 30 metres from the proposed property. So the proposed block plan shows the dwelling sitting side on to Cockane's Lane, which relates appropriately to the properties on the opposite side, to the western side. A detached, or a parking bay will be to the side of the property, and another parking bay to the front. As I stated, a small section of hedgerow will be removed to facilitate access, and the trees to the front will be retained, and along with a protected tree along the boundary. There'll be further landscaping to the actual north of the parking bays too. So in terms of the design, it's a traditional design which relates appropriately to the character of the area. The introduction of a brick plinth and coins to the side add interest. A slate roof and a rendered finish relates acceptably to the character of the locality. The property will be 3 bedrooms, as stated, with a living room and dining area to the ground, with a parking bay to the side. This shows the dwelling in relation to the root protection zones of the protected trees. As you can see, it sits well clear of the protected zones of the trees, and the council's tree officer is happy that the dwelling is sited to not adversely impact upon the health of those trees. So, turning to the merits of the application, as I stated previously, since the appeal dismissal for a single dwelling on this site, the circumstances have changed in the vicinity of the area. Firstly, to the south and east, 145 dwellings have been approved on appeal. This was in June 2016. And to the north, a further development for 60 dwellings was approved on appeal, and this was approved in December 2016. And both these are after the dismissal of the single dwelling on this site, which was in April 2016. So since that appeal decision and the assessment of that decision, circumstances surrounding the site have changed. So looking at the appeal inspector's decision, his main concerns were in regard to the development having an adverse urbanising impact in views along the lane, most notably in a westward direction. Also, it would cause material harm to the area's open and rural character and appearance. The inspector felt that development for a single dwelling on this plot would fail the environmental dimension of sustainable development. He did, however, concede that it would meet the social and economic strands of sustainability, given the proximity of the site to Alresford and the facilities contained within the village. However, since this decision, the two large housing schemes have somewhat urbanised or would urbanise this end of Cockaines Lane. The development would be situated directly opposite the 60 dwellings and directly adjacent the 145 dwellings to the south and east, and would in time be surrounded by residential properties, which again would really overcome what the inspector's concerns were in regard to the urbanising impact of a single dwelling on this site. With the protection or the retention of the trees to the frontage, and also with the reduction in the height of the property and the removal of the flat roof garage, which the inspector also had concerns with, the development is now considered to be acceptable and the inspector's concerns are overcome. So the application is therefore recommended for approval. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now I'm turning to my speakers. I have a speaker against Mr. Malcolm Inkster. Mr. Inkster, if you're there, if you'd like to come forward to the table, sir. I understand you're speaking on behalf of Mr. David Cruz, if that's correct. Right, sir. Well, very welcome. And once you're down, and you have 3 minutes to speak.
Thank you. I'm
sir.
going to speak like the clappers to get 3 minutes in.
I'm afraid so.
There was a note circulated which refers to the 4 points I will be speaking to. So I do tend to mumble. I'll try not to, and I'll try and do it in 3 minutes. Okay, point 1. Tendring District Council has consistently refused planning permission on this site, and the consequent appeals saw the inspectorate favouring the council's position, dismissing appeals in 2014 and recently April 2016. The application is essentially the same as the 2015 application as dismissed. The only real differences being the garage is removed, though replaced by a paved parking area, and the height of the house reduced from 8.77 to 7.7 metres. Otherwise, the size, dimension, layout, footprint and location of the house, or mass, bulk and siting, is basically the same as that previously dismissed. So the following factors leading to the inspector's dismissal in 2016 remain. These are: the house would not enhance or maintain the vitality of the rural community. The immediate area has an attractive rural character due to the trees and other vegetation alongside it. The site as a frontage space contributes significantly to the rural character. The dwelling introduces a significant mass of built form into a space contributing to the spacious character. This house, in its prominent location, would not accord with the environmental dimension of sustainable development. The form of the two-storey building would do little to contribute positively to local character. The development would cause serious harm to the character and appearance of its surroundings and fail to achieve high-quality design. Point 3, the officer report refers to the relevance of policies of the Tendring District Council Local Plan 1333 Preferred Options document, which constitutes the emerging local plan and carries appropriate weight. 2 matters. First, Alresford is one of the 6 service centres that the emerging plan anticipates contributing to deliver 333 houses in total. Consented sites in Alresford can already accommodate over 250 houses, or the equivalent of around 3/4 of the total of the 6 settlements. This 30% growth of Alresford proportionately exceeds the planned delivery of houses for Clacton and Harwich. This house is not needed. Second, the settlement boundary for Alresford was redrawn in a 2016 consultative document. It encompasses the Cockaines Lane South appeal decision, but quite rightly keeps the application site outside the amended settlement boundary. The most relevant policy, SPL2 of the emerging plan, which determines that development outside settlement boundaries will be subject to strict control unless needed or if bringing positive outcomes for the rural economy. A house here does neither. Policy SPL2 states development will be refused unless it is necessary. It's not. It cannot be located on land in the settlement boundary. It can. It would not conflict with the definition of sustainable development. It would. Development would not cause any adverse impacts outweighing the benefits. There is no economic need, but there is an adverse environmental impact. To refuse this application would be consistent with previous decisions of the Council and Inspectorate. There are no compelling reasons to do otherwise. Indeed, permission would undermine the Council's own emerging local plan even before the ink dries, hence my use of the word duty in that note. The applicant would have the opportunity to appeal, but I'm confident it would be dismissed again. Alternatively, he could properly engage in the local plan process to argue his case. Thank you.
Thank you
I don't
very
know if
much.
it was under 3 minutes, but
Just on.
just on. Well done. Okay, thank you.
Well timed, sir.
And now for the Parish Council, Mr. Ernie Osborne, please.
Good evening, everybody. Mr. Chairman, before we start, I was a bit confused with one of the maps that were put up there regarding the trees and the roots of the trees. Yeah, I thought so. That bears no relationship to the one that I have here, which clearly shows the root dimensions on this particular site. So I don't know what one has to do about this. This was something that I didn't expect tonight, but I fortunately brought this with me because the trees are very, very important, as you will see by my statement. So I don't know whether... Would you like this? Would you like me to bring this down there?
Yes, have you got the number, Mr. Osborne, please? That would be helpful.
05 824 105. Oh, thanks, Kath. Do they have that, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Can that be put on this?
We'll have a look at that, Mr. Osborne. If you'd like to do your 3 minutes now, and by then the officers will have a chance to compare it with this drawing.
A number of you may be asking yourself why we are looking at this particular site yet again. It beggars belief that we must, the third attempt to build a house on Cockaynes Lane on an old tennis court, and why it has been refused by TDC at least 3 times and Her Majesty's Planning Inspectorate only a few months ago for the second time in as many years. I'm informed that the Planning Officer has put this forward for approval, stating that the design now meets the criteria. No, it doesn't. It still remains outside the settlement boundary, and don't say just. You're either inside or outside. The problem with the trees still remain, with the majority of those with TPOs on them. To say that the roots are currently away from the new proposed development is incorrect. It even suggests that an established tree should be cut down because it's in poor condition, not that its roots already extend to where the proposed building will take place, and that the roots of one of the beautiful pine trees, which has a TPO, would be starting to creep under the foundations. Just leave the trees alone, please. Its position on Cockaynes Lane has not changed. Although 200 homes are now to be built either side of the lane, both developers are very keen to retain the integrity of the lane by keeping the high hedges and all the trees along the lane and the new houses backing from the lane by what is described by the Head of Planning, Catherine Bicknell, as a protected lane, and it's characterised by large houses in generous plots and mainly set back from the road. There are generous road verges and established plants resulting in spacious rural character. That was on the 25th of September 2015. The Magistrate Inspectorate, DJ Jones, wrote on the 19th of December in his conclusion, the proposed development would materially harmful all the character and appearance of the area and as such would conflict with development plan. It would not provide acceptable living conditions for the future occupants and have an adverse impact on protected trees. These adverse impacts would not be overweighed by other considerations, including the Parish Council support, and in fact, the dwelling would be effectively in terms of its use of its resources. Therefore, for the above reasons, I have regard to all other matters raised and conclude that the appeal should be dismissed. A letter on the 25th of July 2015 from the head of planning, Catherine Bicknell, stated, and I quote in her summing up, the proposed will introduce development into a space which currently contributes to a spacious and rural character along Cockaines Lane. The open nature of the site, protected trees on the proximity of the lane contributes sufficiently to existing characters of the area. A letter from Catherine Bicknell on the 17th states the summing, and that was that one. The last inspectorate, which was Jane Mills in March of last year, quotes, it would be sited in a location where it is not enhance or maintain the vitality of any rural community, notwithstanding the proximity of the village of Alresford. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. I think I'll continue with the speakers and then the officers will give us some advice on why there is a difference apparently on the drawings.
Right.
And the next speaker then is Ward Councillor, Councillor Scott.
Thank you.
Good evening, councillors, chairman, and I hope you have a happy new year.
Thank you.
I'd like to thank my colleague, Councillor Osborne, chairman, the vice chairman of the parish council and chairman of planning, for his comments. I'm speaking against the application. My view is that Cockaines Lane has had its fair share of site visits from you guys, and the lane has already had 2 applications been approved on appeal south and north of Cockaines Lane. Residents have asked me to speak against the application because of the lane, because the lane is a protected lane in terms of we use it as a point of leisure activity. We go down that lane, people walk down that lane, and when you get to past the entrance of Cockaine, the proposed site of southern side, the 145, it narrows. So there's no footpath leading on to this site here. The private access, sometimes you walk down there are cars parked there when people are visiting the 2 cottages there, because there's nowhere else to park your vehicles, so they're parking on the front. So that access, the private access, can be a little bit chocker there. Several site visits ago, I went on the site visit with councillors, and it was on a very rainy day. That part of Cockaines Lane is boggy, it's flooded. The surface water goes on that site, and I suspect it doesn't go anywhere else around there. So when they proposed to do the southern side, when they put the footpaths in, filling in the ditch along one side, they're going to have a problem with the access there, and then going on to this application, this site, it will cause problems in terms of congestion, because people won't turn right to go to Station Road, or turn left up Cockaines Lane the other way, because that is the shortest route, and then there will cause problems there when people coming out from that site there. Please excuse my voice, I've had a horrendous chest infection. People have sent in 32 letters of objection. These people, not just from Cockaines Lane, they're from several people from across the village, who say that this will maternity harmful to the rural lane's character and appearance. Well, it will. This lane is Cockayne's Lane. It's one of the only lanes left in Alresford. People walk down this lane to go to the woods in the corner and further around. There's no soakaways. The drainage, the utility supplies are limited down there, and it can be a problem because that factory there, that like industrial unit, a couple of times a year they have a very large lorry that comes down that lane, but it doesn't go down that lane. It reverses up that lane, and it causes problems from people going up and down that lane. It's quite hard to judge when the lorry comes along, but when it does, it comes down there and it causes problems for people down that lane. So there is a problem with highway issues down there. The lane is narrow. It gets even narrower when you get round that sharp bend at the other end. But having another house down this lane will set a precedent for future development further down the lane. There are people down there who are concerned about further developments further on down Cockayne's Lane. I must have to point out that the southern half and the northern half are outline permission. They are approved on outline permission. So when the detailed applications come in, they say on the southern side application there's going to be a right-of-way access onto the southern site, which then cause problems for people coming down Cockayne's Lane. They have to wait. You could have tailbacks, could have problem of people coming off the site. So you have to consider that the other two sites with this application, in my view, because of traffic congestion and problems going up and down the lane, the footpaths will go up from Station Road corner up Cockayne's Lane, but it will stop at the access at the southern site and the northern site. But it won't go any further. But I think in the report it says there will be a continuous footpath down to this site, which I don't think is correct. Last time, members said it was not appropriate for the lane. I hope members still continue with their view. Councillor Osborne brought up the subject of the roots. I had a comment on here. It said, what about the roots of the trees? Because these very large trees, oak trees, their roots do go out. And I wasn't aware there was two different kind of maps. So I was quite pleased that Councillor Osborne actually brought the subject up on the roots. I'm just saying that Alresford residents and Cockayne's Lane residents have had enough of future development, any more development down this lane. Like I said, the outline permission of the south and the north of one on appeal. Taylor Wimpey yet to come in to get an application in, and the problem with that Cockayne's Lane, the entrance coming in, plus an additional house being built there, it'd be chaotic, it'd be dangerous, and especially when you have a lot of walkers that walk down this lane, enjoy the beauty of this lane. In the summer months, it's wonderful to walk down there, and with this additional property down there, I think it will cause more problems and set a precedent of further more housing and future dwellings to be built down Cockayne's Lane. Thank you, councillors.
Thank you very much, Councillor Scott. And now we have the agent or applicant, Mr. Lawrence Putter, who is, I think, the applicant, if I have that right. That's it. You have 3 minutes, Mr. Putter.
It won't take that long, I promise. I thank the Chairman and the committee members for the opportunity to speak at this meeting. The site is now completely surrounded by residential permissions on all four sides, beyond and from along the site's boundaries. We've worked diligently with planning officers and have been given 2 recommendations for approval. We've sought resolution to the planning inspector's previous concerns regarding design and impact on the lane, including the scale of the building. We have removed the garage to leave a parking space and increased architectural interest in keeping with the surrounding properties. We had previously applied before the 2 appeals for 145 and 60 residential dwellings were upheld. The site was previously viewed in isolation, and as such the inspector could not take into account the impact of these 2 new residential permissions. There were no decisions at the time of our site appeal. Should the application need to be taken to appeal for a further time, then the inspectorate would have to take into account the previous upheld applications and the reasoning for their approvals when judging this site. as in essence it forms part of the same urban development that will have an impact on the lane. The reasons for refusal by the inspector previously were to do with the rural impact on Cockaines Lane, which has been entirely lost due to the upheld appeals. Also, the vehicular entrance to Cockaines Lane has been substantially changed, which again negates any adverse rural impact on that part of the lane. We have taken into account the tree preservation orders and worked with the design to ensure the trees are protected and enhanced. This was all agreed with the tendering tree officer. We would not be adverse to a landscaping scheme if approval was granted as part indicated on the submitted plans for the additional screening to the lane. Previous comments made by the committee related to the concerns of drainage and water runoffs, which are simply not planning issues. They are subject to the control of building regulations. I would like the committee to know that it's the intention that the property would be built for my elderly parents who are here tonight. They love the village and would very much like the opportunity to move to Alresford, as they know it well from the time that I spent there previously. In short, we are seeking permission to build one house, which is now surrounded on all sides by permissions and existing houses, numbering 208 residential dwellings. I do not believe that this can now in any way affect adversely the rural impact of Cockaines Lane. Once again, I thank the committee and the members for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you very much, sir. I'm going to turn to the officer now to see if there's any points he raised, and in particular, of course, this question of the route map.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll just pick up on the tree issue. Both plans were part of the tree survey. The councillor's tree officer has reviewed the survey. The other map that was shown was part of the protective measures according to the root protection zones of the tree. So the tree officer has fully reviewed those plans and agreed that the position of the house wouldn't impinge upon those routes. Also, the previous appeal decision for the dwelling, which the dwelling's still in the same site, and if anything, it's improved the situation because the garage has been removed, so actually the built development is further away from the protected trees. The inspector felt that the development, there was no issues raised by the council in such matters and conditions could ensure protective measures would be undertaken to the trees, and that is all secured as part of the recommendation to enhance and protect the trees through the measures outlined on the plan. So I think that's all I'll really add at this stage. I think the other issue is that the precedent has been set, I believe, in terms of the appeal decisions that have been allowed. In terms of further development to the west, I think that the Cockaines Lane narrows somewhat as you go further to the west, becomes more rural in character. So I think this site, situated within a cluster of built form and eventually further built form, it wouldn't unacceptably urbanise the character of the area.
Thank you very much. Right, councillors, I'm very much in your hands now. You've heard the arguments for both sides, and a lot of you have been involved in the previous decisions as well, so you're well aware of the site, and it's over to you now. Councillor Fairley.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, in relation to the appeal decisions for the 60 and the 145 dwellings, I have to say I do completely still disagree with that decision, certainly in terms of the character of the lane. However, the appeal decisions have been made because the quantity of houses gives benefit. I don't see that this one property will give benefit in that same way. This has been refused on appeal twice. My opinion on its situation hasn't changed. It's, the benefits of this one property, in my view, do not outweigh the damage or the impact on the remaining character of that lane. And if you go left out of the property, it is still, there is still that character of this ancient lane, and I don't believe that has been entirely lost. However, I do feel that if we were minded to approve this one property. It does have a danger of setting a precedent. I will not be voting for approval on this property tonight. Thank you.
John Holmes.
John? Yes, Councillor. Councillor Hunt.
Twice we've refused it. I don't know if garden land had been any point of view before, but that's, to me, is part of the garden of that big house, or it was. And being a lone house, as Councillor Farley said, it's not going to make a great deal of difference. It's not like the others, they're massive, infrastructure. But this one, I think we should stay as we are. And I vote. What is it? Hang on. Jesus Christ.
Yes, you don't need to make a decision on your voting just yet, so I note your point. Further speakers?
Laurie,
Yes, Councillor.
I'd like to make the point that it seems to me this area is going to be totally surrounded by houses. One house with one car, whichever way it turns in that lane, is not going to make any difference whatsoever when you've got upwards of 400 cars being in that local area, in addition to what they've got already. Plus, in the other decisions where it was refused, the gentleman that just spoke has said he's conformed to every single thing that's been thrown at him. He's tried to make it as possible as he can to blend in with everything else. And to me, one house in amongst a conflagration of 200 is not even worth arguing about. I think it should be allowed. From the point of view that it's, when I see the land, it's just laying there doing nothing, it's fallow, it's overgrown. So it might as well be built on, have a nice garden, and add to the surrounding area. Thanks.
All right. Yes, Councillor Benison.
Thank you. I think we'd be on a bit of a sticky wicket, even though it's been refused in the past. I think that the criteria have changed now because of the overturned decisions on Cockaynes Lane and all hundreds of houses that are going to be built there now. This particular plot is surrounded by hedgerow. Trees are being retained. It's not going to impact on the lane because the hedge on the side of the lane will still be in situ, and I don't think it will make as much impact on the lane as the houses on north and south of it, and therefore I think we should approve it.
Councillor Baker.
Thank you, Chairman. I've just reread the planning inspector's reasons for dismissing. And if I could just quote a couple. The appeal site is at present quite clearly in a rural area. Well, it is at the moment, but it won't be when those other properties are built. The development introduces a significant massive built form into a space. Well, if it's going to be surrounded by 205 houses, I don't think that would apply. Development have an adverse urbanising impact in views along the lane. I don't think that would apply. The gentleman's mentioned about the roof, and that's in the report. And the development not enhance or maintain the vitality. I don't think that we have any grounds, unfortunately. It is outside the settlement boundary in both the saved and the emerging plan. But if the points that the inspector have been addressed, if you like, by the granting of the permissions nearby, I'll second the approval recommendations.
If it comes to Councillor Heaney.
Well, I know it's not a planning matter, as the applicant brought up, but when we went there before, I'm just going to mention this in passing, we were actually up to our ankles in water, but in the rain, because it really doesn't drain away. There's no guarantee there's going to be main drains in that road. The main drains for the other two developments may go a different way, or straight down Cockaynes Lane. If you have a septic tank in that area, there's not enough room in a tennis court-sized plot for it to drain away, as I know too, it's one thing I do know about septic tanks. And Mr. Inkster made the point that it's outside the settlement boundary. You don't need to have any more houses. And our plans, I think it was SPL2, I can't remember what I wrote down, says if you don't need it out, it's got to have a really good reason for developing outside the village boundary. Now, there is no reason now for developing outside the village boundary. You've got, whatever it is, 60 over there and 100 and God knows what over there. You don't need another one. And it's an attractive house, Cocaine's house, and all this is going to do is going to stick another sort of house in front of it, right in front of it. So I'm not able to vote for it either.
Any further speakers? Yes, Councillor.
I'd like to put forward a motion for it to be accepted.
Right, and I think I've got I think Councillor Baker got in for a seconder, but if there are any further debate before I take a vote on it? No further speakers? So Councillor Gray is proposing acceptance of the terms laid out on page 86, and that is seconded by Councillor Baker. Those in favour of approval, please show. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And those against? 1, 2, 3. That, by my count, is 5-3 in favour of approval. It is now approved. Now we read.
I must say, I couldn't bring myself to vote for it, but I don't know how we could return it.
Right, we'll make a start. We are now on page 42. Those of you following, it is application number 1600421 full, and it's for the development at the Chicken Farm, Thorpe Road, Little Clacton. Turn to the officer for comments.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to give you a short update on this one, which doesn't appear on your green sheet, for which I apologise. And it really relates to the description of development. The description of development, as you'll see here, is for 81 predominantly single-storey retirement dwellings, following demolition of an existing dwelling. Now, although the application is describes it as retirement dwellings, there's not really any planning justification to limit occupation of these dwellings to older people or to people who've retired. In fact, local plan policies seek to get a mix of developments on any larger development, anything over about 10 dwellings. And so actually limiting it in that way, in my view, would be contrary to that policy. And in fact, a condition limiting occupation in that way probably wouldn't pass the tests about conditions, about whether they're reasonably related and necessary to make the development acceptable. Now, I've had a conversation with the applicant. It's still the applicant's wish to market the properties to people who've retired, to older people, and that's where the applicant sees there being a strong market. And there's no problem. Obviously, the local planning authority has no control over how the development is marketed. So I wouldn't say the applicant is happy to remove the reference to retirement dwellings from the description of development, but I think it's accepted, if you like, that's certainly my view and my recommendation to committee, that it should be removed from the description of development. There are a couple of knock-on consequences of that, which I can cover in more detail later, but I'll touch on now. One of them is we would therefore not include a condition restricting it to retirement accommodation. And secondly, we would need to consider a potential education contribution through the 106, because there could be children on the site who would require education. Okay, thank you, Chair. Okay, that's the red line, that's the application site. Members will have visited it yesterday on the visits around the various sites. So across the top of the site is Holland Road, and down the west of the site is Thorpe Road. Okay. There's an aerial view, and you can just make out on there the existing dwelling within the site, and it's this sort of brown area which is the site, so sort of previously used agricultural land. And then we've got a number of photographs around the site. So there's the site entrance from Thorpe Road, and there's Thorpe Road itself. Views along Holland Road, and it sort of shows the extent of some hedgerows and trees along the frontage of the site. There's the existing property and the site, looking from the site out to the access onto Thorpe Road. Some views across the site, not many particularly distinguishing features apart from some of the vegetation around the site. You can see there where there have been buildings on the site previously, and similarly just looking in different directions, looking east and northeast in those cases. Okay, so there's the Google Earth view of the site, and there you can see it in relation to the built development of Clacton, and I'll return to that slide in a little bit more detail in a minute. Okay, this particular plan is taken from the emerging local plan. The application site is up in this top corner here of the pink shaded area, which is an allocation for development in the emerging local plan. Okay, so thinking about the principle of development, it's not allocated at the moment in the existing adopted local plan. It's outside the boundary, the settlement boundary in the adopted plan. Not allocated to development, but does become so in the emerging plan. In the emerging plan, it's part of a much larger development, so all of this land, a major mixed-use development which could provide about 1,000 dwellings, possibly up to 750 in the plan period, and in fact 200 in this area already benefit from planning permission. So at the moment, quite an isolated site, but in the fullness of time, if the local plan proceeds as currently envisaged, would be part of a larger development. The council, as you know, is currently unable to identify a 5-year supply of deliverable housing sites, plus the 20% buffer that's required, although this position is rapidly improving, and a robust 5-year supply could well be in place quite early this year. So the principle of development can be supported based on that current shortfall of housing land, the requirements of the MPPF to therefore look positively on housing proposals, the site's potential to be sustainable, although as we said it's quite isolated at the moment, and the provisional support for the development in the emerging local plan. Concerns have been expressed from adjoining landowners, and this is a submission from one of the adjacent landowners to the local plan. So the application site that we're looking at this evening is here. And the owners of this site are concerned really in two ways. One, about the connections between the two sites in order for this site that we're considering tonight to be able to make a safe pedestrian route. So there's not sufficient land within the highway for a footpath to be provided down Thorpe Road back towards existing facilities. And so as it stands, this site would have to proceed without any pedestrian link. There's the potential to provide a pedestrian link into this development site when it comes forward. But obviously there'd need to be an agreement between the two parties to achieve that. The second issue of concern to these landowners is the impact on infrastructure, and really just the point that by the sites coming forward incrementally and individually, there shouldn't be a bigger impact on this big site, if you like, that this one should make its proper proportional contribution to infrastructure and not sort of get under the wire, if you like, because it's not part of the bigger comprehensive plan. Okay, so if we just, actually, this slide shows the planning permissions that currently exist. So on this this slide is a little confusing, but it's in two parts. So if we look on the left-hand side, it shows a development of 200 houses here that has planning permission, and the site we're looking at tonight is here in this area. And then the other side of the site shows a permission for 5, and that's in here. Okay, so that's just to give you some context. There are other planning permissions, so there is evidence that development will happen here, but obviously the council can't force that to happen. So if we just look back to this context picture, just to give you an idea, the factory shopping village is down here. It's been remodelled a little bit since this was taken, but that's about 1 kilometre away. There are shops in Little Clacton about 1.5 kilometres away. It's about 850 metres to the nearest bus stop, 1.6 kilometres to the primary school, and 1.6 kilometres to the nearest big store, which is Morrison's, which is in there. And then there's Tesco's down there. Okay. Now, we did have an objection from County Highways because of the lack of a footpath along Thorpe Road to make a safe passage for pedestrians, but that objection has been withdrawn. And so we no longer have any objection from County Highways. What they have asked for is conditions which require various quite details of the layout to be achieved. Okay. Now, this is a full planning application, and so it is all of the details that members are considering this evening. We've had a lot of large outline applications recently, so this is fairly unusual in that you're looking at the details of the layout and also of the individual house types. It's set out, as you can see from here, in a fairly traditional sort of block format, with houses fronting onto the road, gardens backing onto each other. Most have a garage and parking space. There are 1 or 2 areas where there are sort of shared parking areas, but they're in the minority. There are 2 areas of informal open space, which are just a little bit, a shade below the standard we would normally look for. And they are sort of dual functional, if you like, so they're also sort of drainage areas, which in the context of a development predominantly for older people is probably fine. It's perhaps not quite so suitable if there are going to be families and young children there, the sort of lack of an obvious play space for those children. There's a new junction to be provided onto Thorpe Road to provide the access. There's already a junction that's been put in that you all have used for the development that's got planning permission further south down Thorpe Lane. So the character of Thorpe Road will change quite considerably. Overall, the development would provide 25 2-bed bungalows, 54 3-bed bungalows, and then 2 sort of 1.5-storey dwellings here at the entrance, just to make a bit more of an impact as you enter and leave the site. In terms of other detailed issues, in terms of flood risk and drainage, there are no objections from the statutory undertakers. Those issues have been addressed. In terms of archaeology, an extended phase 1 survey has been completed with other follow-up surveys on the detailed matters. And in summary, while the trees and hedgerows on the site do provide some habitats for common birds, common lizards, etc., there are no particularly significant issues. Those issues that exist can be mitigated through the development process. Archaeology, there's a recommendation to attach a condition to require trial trenching and also record what's found on the site. I've already touched on infrastructure, so the recommendation is to secure £22,000 towards health provision to provide capacity in local surgeries. There's no contribution needed for foul sewerage. Education hasn't been assessed in the context of a sort of open mixed development, so that would need to be done. And we would attempt to secure 30% affordable housing, subject to viability testing. The applicant has indicated that the viability on this site is quite tight. There are quite a lot of costs associated with it. It is quite an isolated site with very little previous development on it. And so whether all of those contributions would be affordable would have to be tested. So the applicant has done some viability work, and the council would need to get that independently tested to establish what could actually be achieved. Okay, so in the... Oh, let's have a look at the individual units. I think there's an unfortunate typo in the report which describes them as being unattractive as opposed to not unattractive. So apologies to the applicant for that. But they are fairly traditional bungalows in various formats. So some of them are little terraces of 3, and there are other semi-detached units with a fairly consistent palette of materials and design features, but with some variation to provide a fairly typical and acceptable development. So in terms of the overall planning balance, trying to weigh up all of those issues, there's clearly a positive economic value to the development through the construction of the buildings and the activity of the people who would then move into the proposed development. In terms of environment, those impacts that there are could be mitigated. And that just leaves the sort of social arm of the 3 strands of sustainability. And at present, this is an isolated site. In the future, it will be part of, hopefully, a much larger development, and therefore socially would be better, would be more acceptable. But there is the lack of the pedestrian link in the meantime, which sort of weighs against it. But overall, officers feel that the adverse impacts don't significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits, and therefore, subject to the Section 106 agreement, have recommended approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Now, I have only one speaker, and that is the applicant for the agent, is Kate Wood, if that's correct. Welcome. When you've got settled and pushed the button down, and you have 3 minutes, Ms. Wood.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm actually the applicant's planning representative. And I'd just like to clarify that the demolition, it says following demolition, obviously the house that's on the site at the moment won't be demolished for about 3 years because it will be used as a site office. So it's not an instant demolition that would be happening, and that affects the BAT surveys that would be required at a later stage. Just to talk about connectivity, paragraph 6.28 of your officer report refers to legal advice that the council can't compel the developers of the adjacent sites by a planning condition or a legal agreement to provide a link back through to this site. But the relevant point is that the developer of the adjacent sites, and both adjacent sites, will, at the reserved matter stage, because they only have outline permission, negotiate the layout with the planning officers, having regard to the context set by this site. So you can be in no doubt that there will be a possibility there of officers being able to continue the negotiations and make sure that those links are provided. There's no legal requirement, it's just good planning, basically. And this site facilitates links through by providing pedestrian and cycle routes up to the mutual boundary. And it's simply a matter for your officers to facilitate those links to cross the boundary when they negotiate the designs of the adjacent schemes, if they feel that's necessary. But your highway authority has said that it is not necessary to provide that, and they haven't objected to the application. The question of links through is actually just a matter of good planning, not of necessity, and the highway authority is happy. This application, as you've seen in the presentation by the officer, is part of a larger site, a very large site being allocated for mixed-use development. And to allocate it, the council must have been satisfied that the wider site is deliverable as a whole. Otherwise, it wouldn't be able to allocate it. Therefore, it's unlikely that the wider site would be left undeveloped for very long, particularly since the adjacent landowner has already invested heavily in the provision of highway works and a roundabout. Meanwhile, the council has also granted permission for 5 dwellings to the south at the Willows crossways, also with no connectivity requirements into adjacent sites, and we understand is progressing with proposals for residential development of the adjacent garden centre as well. In terms of current policy, there obviously, as has been said, there's a lack of a current 5-year land supply, which makes the saved policies that restrict housing supply in the adopted local plan out of date, and that includes policies that restrict the mix and type of dwellings. So in fact it is acceptable to have retirement housing in particular here, and as this is part of such a larger site, the overall mix that you will get in this sustainable urban extension to Clacton is effectively what it will be. Overall, the mix will provide much needed housing, in particular much needed affordable housing and much needed bungalows that have been said even by your own housing officer that there is a need for them. What was the other thing? Yeah, so we are proposing that these will be retirement bungalows. They will be marketed as retirement bungalows, and we are happy to accept a condition that they should be for retirement housing if you think that is appropriate. Certainly that's how it'll be taken forward, and we expect people who want to retire into a smaller and easier to access dwelling to be able to do that. And this is a low density scheme. We've managed to keep boundary vegetation as far as possible, which is shown on the plan there. And I would also just like to say that the drainage ponds that are shown in the open space will actually be dry most of the time. There are swales along the roads which aren't shown on that particular plan, but the discharge of surface water is actually into a ditch, and so those ponds will only be required in extreme flood situations and will generally be dry most of the time. So just wanted to point that out to you. So therefore we respectfully request that members approve this application as recommended. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now I know that my Vice Chairman has a question, so we'll start with that one before I call to the...
I just wanted to ask Mrs Bicknell, is it they can't legally restrict it to over 55? Is that what you were saying? They can market it for over 55, but if somebody younger wanted to come in, would they be able to say, no, you can't come, or what?
I think there's two different issues, really. There's one about the planning process and what it's reasonable and lawful to do in planning terms, and then there's what the owner of the properties wishes to do and how he would like to market and dispose of the properties. So the council wouldn't want to interfere with how the owner markets the properties, the market that he targets, and he could obviously choose as a landowner who he sells those properties to. But completely separately from that, my point was I don't think there's any planning justification to limit it to older people only. There's no special circumstances that I can see that mean that that development would only be suitable for older people. And in fact, the overall housing need in the district is for a whole variety of housing types to appeal to a whole variety of families, older people, young first-time buyers, etc. And I can't see any planning justification to try to limit it within that full range. And I think I would go as far, and Charlotte might want to contribute, I think I would say a condition that attempted to do that would be challengeable and potentially unlawful. So my advice is not to attach that sort of condition. It won't stop the applicant marketing it in whatever way he chooses to. But my advice is not to limit it in that way.
Do you wish? You don't wish to add anything?
Just to add, Kath and I had a discussion about the possibility of that condition, and there's certain elements that need to be met for a condition to be acceptable, to be added in planning terms, and a couple of those wouldn't be met. So it wouldn't be a lawful condition, in my opinion, and on my advice.
Yeah. Yes, Councillor.
Just as a matter of interest, on the way home from work this evening, I was listening to a case in point on the radio. And there's an estate somewhere in Essex where they've put a legal rider on the property that nobody with a van is allowed to buy the house on that estate. It's it's got a special word for it, I can't remember. A caveat, yeah. And they said they can put that, the builders can put that caveat on the houses and say, if you've got a van, we're not selling it to you. So I suppose that would, maybe they could put a caveat on there for older people, maybe?
Yeah.
I think, obviously, what Kath explained was, there's a difference between the planning process and what an individual developer can do. Outside of kind of your consideration, really, but just answering that point, you can put covenants on a sale of a house. So the developer, the person that owns it, can put covenants into any transfer of land that they want, restricting the development. That's a private contract between the developer and the purchaser. So that is possible to restrict use of land in that way, but that's not what we're looking at here, and that would be up to the developer whether they did that. I can't see any reason why they would choose to do that, but that would be their choice.
Right. Councillor McWilliams.
Thank you, Chairman. I thank Mrs Bicknell very much for explaining all of that, because I'd be quite honest, yesterday it was one of my biggest concerns, was that it was only going to be said that it was going to be for retired people. My concern is that young people actually too appreciate the fact that they could start off with a property that is a bungalow. But having said that, I'm hopeful that obviously the developer will do what he thinks is right and what is justifiable, but we're not actually doing it ourselves and saying it ourselves. We're leaving it open and we're going for the Section 106. So I really do appreciate that. It does concern me about the pedestrian side of it, I have to say, and I don't know. Obviously, Kath has explained that we can't do a condition unless there is something that we can condition within that. I like the idea of this development, but I am concerned over the pedestrian part of it. So at the moment, I'll just leave that open.
Councillor Baker.
Thank you, Chairman. I too had some concerns about the fact that it was going to be predominantly single-storey retirement dwellings, and having had Kath's explanation and the recommendation, if you like, to take out the restriction to retirement accommodation, and I appreciate that the applicant is going to try and sell it to the retired, but I retired at 49, so I'm relatively young, and in that case I could still have young children, and if he can't sell it to the retired, then there are going to be children, grandchildren, and there's going to be no education provision. So I would like to see, if we're minded to approve, that a 106 agreement or negotiations or talks would be had between our planning officers and the applicant. And I appreciate that we've said about the, the tightness of what could be given and afforded and everything else, but I think that should be there somewhere. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Heaney.
What I had a concern was that Mrs Bicknell said it was below standard, the open space was below standard if it wasn't for retirement. Now, it appears to me that it's very likely not going to be for retirement, and yet then there's very, very little open space. Could I ask you about that, please?
Yes, it's actually very close to the standard. It's only a shade under what would be the normal standard in any other development. I think it was about 10% below our standard, which I don't think would be on its own, a reason to refuse planning permission.
Right, I'll just put in a question myself, and I say I've got two other councillors as well. The thing that worries me, I must be honest, is this question of we can't get a footpath in Thorpe Road, County have said, and we are saying that, well, yes, we could get a footpath as long as the other developers agree, and possibly we could put it in their terms. But we don't know when these other developers are going to come forth. I mean, this plan covers us to 2032. Well, surely we haven't got to wait till 2032 if to get a footpath from this. And this really does worry me. County have seemingly accepted it now, but it is a major stumbling block for me. Right, Councillor Holmes.
How many dwellings per acre?
Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. It's 23 per hectare, so it's quite low. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Benison.
Thank you, Chairman. The Chairman actually brought up some of the points I was going to make, but in addition to the access concerns, if this was going to be marketed to younger people with children, there is a lack of play provision there. And also I'd be interested to know whether the Highways Department would reconsider. I mean, they obviously considered the access in Thorpe Road on the basis that this was going to be retirement bungalows, which would mean that most people would be driving. But if there are children living there, children would be using Thorpe Road with no footpath. And if access was allowed onto the neighbouring site, I can't see anywhere on that current plan where there would be anyway, because the footpath that I can see on one of the other slides doesn't square up. The only access to that site would be along the southern boundary to link up with that footpath, and the actual layout wouldn't allow that. Thank you.
Yes,
yeah, I think there were sort of two main points there. I don't know whether County Council would take any different view if it's not for retirement only. I don't think there's anything in their comments to date that suggests it would be different, but I don't know because they have looked at it in that light. And in terms of the footpath connections, this is a submission for the local plan process, and so these sort of connections are indicative only. Obviously, details would come forward in due course, and so it could be possible to get a layout on this site that did provide a suitable connection. It'd be possible.
Come back on that.
Yes.
And also the lack of play provision, if it was marketed to people with families.
Yeah, well, the open space is where we did touch on, didn't we? And that's very close to, but slightly below standard. In terms of formal play provision, I don't think that the comments that came back actually were shaped particularly because it was retirement only, but I will just double check that point.
Councillor Fairley.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, Councillor Benison raised one point in terms of if it was not going to be retirement, would that affect the decision that has been made by Highways? My other question is that Highways, you said initially, did have an issue, but they changed their minds. I wondered what it was that... Do we know why they withdrew their objection?
I don't have a written explanation as to why. There wasn't an objection from them to a similar position on the site to the south. And so it may be that they felt they needed to be consistent between those two pieces of advice. Obviously, the one to the south is a much smaller site, 5 dwellings, as compared to the 81. But I don't have a written explanation from them.
Councillor Holmes.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry. You'll come. Yeah.
Sorry, thank you. In terms of footpaths, pedestrian access, is there any public rights of way that would link this in any way? No public rights of way either.
Sorry, Councillor Holmes.
Yeah, sorry. Well, it's more like a lane than a road, as far as I'm concerned, anyway. So you don't put footpaths or paved lanes in a lane as such. It's in the country, supposedly, but there are going to be 200 or 300 houses going in there. But can you just go back one picture? That one at the top is the site, yeah, in the corner.
It's that field.
Yeah, why is that little bit on the end there? That bit there.
This bit?
Yes.
I think it's just because it's in a different ownership. So the people promoting this site have got together with the landowners. They're putting it together, promoting it as one. And this application site, the applicant controls this land. I'm assuming that this is in another or a number of other ownerships.
Right.
The local plan allocation actually allocates a bit more of that, sorry. The emerging local plan allocation includes a little bit more land there, so it's obviously sort of blind to the land ownership.
Councillor Gray.
Yeah, I'd like to say that looking at the land when we visited it, it looks to me like a brownfield site. It's been buildings on, it's overgrown, it's rubbish. Now, when we think about the amount of greenfield sites we've given permission for and lost all that green land, I think it'd be an insult to the people that have lost their greenfield sites if we refuse this, because it is ex-industrial land. So I propose it's accepted.
Right, before I take the vote, Councillor Baker.
Chairman, I'd quite happily accept it, but obviously the discussions about the education, I think it should be. Can we put that in as a condition, or would that be, as I'd stated earlier?
Right. Yes.
Yeah, Chair, my recommendation would be to revise the written recommendation to add under Part A that details what would be included in a Section 106 agreement. So I'm looking at page 43. And at the moment, we've said on-site council housing / affordable housing, health contribution and completion and transfer of public open space. I would recommend that we add to that education contribution. And then in the conditions, delete reference to restriction to retirement accommodation.
Number 7.
Yeah, number 7. But I think committee just need to bear in mind that that will be subject to viability testing, and certainly the applicants have indicated the development is unlikely to be able to be policy compliant and provide for the policy amount of affordable housing, the health contribution and the open space and the education contribution.
Councillor McWilliams.
Yeah, can I just one thing, because it does worry me, just a thought. I just wonder, can we sort of negotiate a public's right of way? Can we ask them to negotiate that? Because that really is a concern. If that something like that could be done, that would save that possible problem with neighbouring developments.
Please.
I don't think it is possible in this situation to require them to provide that, because I think what you're looking for is either a normal solution would be either a footpath within the highway, so that would be down Thorpe Road, but the County Council have confirmed that it's just not wide enough to accommodate two-way traffic and a footpath of the appropriate width, or a link into adjacent land. And the layout that's proposed does provide for that possibility, but I think we have to stop short of trying to actually require them to do it, because it's out of their control to actually stipulate they have to come to an agreement with a neighbouring landowner.
No further speakers, in which case I have a proposal of acceptance from Councillor Gray. Councillor McWilliams, did I see you indicated you were seconded?
Yes, I did, Chair. Yes.
Right. No further speakers? Right. Now, the recommendations are on page 43 with, in paragraph A, the addition of "and education contribution", and condition 7 will now be taken out so that you know what you're voting for. Those in favour, please show. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Right. And I'm abstaining on it for the footpath reason, so it is approved. Right, councillors, let's get on. We are now on page 70, which is application number 1600427 outline, and it's in the street Little Clacton. Straight.
Right, thank you, Chair. This is application seeks outline permission for up to 10 dwellings at 24 the street Little Clacton. All matters are reserved, so it's the principle of development only which is to be considered. You will see on the update sheet that there is an update with regards to the access and the pedestrian crossing. This will be covered later on in the presentation. So the site is to the side and the rear of Hayes Garage on the eastern side of the street, outlined in red. It also lies adjacent to the public house known as the Blacksmith's Arms. The application site is shown in red, and the land within same ownership of the applicant is in blue. This application follows a previously withdrawn application which included the land to the rear and proposed up to 21 dwellings. Under consideration this evening is 10 dwellings within the site edged red. So in terms of aerial view, the existing garage is here and the site is in this location here. It's partly used in connection with the existing garage and partly as a paddock area. So you would have visited the site yesterday, but this shows the site in street scene view. So you've got the garage in this location and the public house in that location, and this shows the existing access and the pedestrian position of the pedestrian crossing. So again, that's the pedestrian crossing, and so it's a view taken from within the site looking along the existing access towards the pedestrian crossing. And that is a view looking east towards the rear of the existing hard standing area. And that is the land beyond, which is the paddock area of the application site. And again, that is a view across the existing paddock to the northern boundary of the site. And then this shows a wider view, so the relationship with the existing garage looking out onto the street. And this shows the relationship with the neighbouring Blacksmith Arms, which is this building there, and there is a public footpath which runs between the site and the Blacksmith Arms along the boundary of the site. So these plans show the adopted site development boundary on the left. So the application site is, well, there's a garage, so part of the site is there and it's this land beyond. In terms of the emerging local plan, which is in this location here, you'll see that the settlement boundary is proposed to be extended, but not to the extent to include the entire application site. So most of the site lies outside of any of the proposed settlement boundaries. However, in accordance with the National Planning Policy Framework, the site is considered to meet the definition of sustainable development, as it will bring economic benefit, is socially sustainable due to the proximity to facilities within Little Clacton, and does not result in any environmental harm. So as mentioned, it is an outline application, so this shows an indicative layout only. It indicates that the site can accommodate 10 dwellings without resulting in any harm to the character of the area, as it's well enclosed, or any impact on neighbours' amenities due to the distance between two existing residential properties. There is an issue with regard to the amenity of the potential occupiers of the dwellings due to the relationship with the existing garage and the operations that may occur on there. However, the Council's Environmental Health Department is satisfied that this can be controlled by condition to ensure that the Reserve Matters application is informed by a noise and lighting survey. So again, this is just indicative, but it shows how the development would potentially look from within the site. So it shows a mixture of types and sizes of dwellings. So in terms of the access arrangements, this is the plan that is referred to in the update sheet. Comments have been received, or Essex County Council have confirmed that they have no objection to this arrangement, and that this arrangement would not require the pedestrian crossing to be relocated. This advice was given on the basis that information provided by a highway consultant demonstrated that the development was unlikely to increase the risk of collisions on the crossing, and that there was no personal injury collisions within the vicinity of the primary access to the garage. However, members should be aware that this is an outline application, so we're not establishing details of the access as part of this application. This information seeks to demonstrate that a suitable access can be achieved. The application is therefore recommended for approval, subject to conditions set out in the officer's report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Now, all I have, I noticed in there that Little Clacton Parish Council support the application, so I've got nobody for or against it. In fact, straight to the agent, Mr. Gittings.
This outline application site lies at the heart of Little Clacton, as you will know, and comprises land owned by the proprietor of Hayes Garage, which fronts the street. An improved access to serve both the garage and the envisaged village housing is proposed. Initial proposals related to a much larger area of the backland for up to 21 dwellings, but following officer advice regarding related impacts, this application was withdrawn. Following discussions with officers, a much reduced scheme was resubmitted for up to 11 dwellings, and this has been further reduced by one dwelling to reflect changes to the latest detailed design for the access road junction onto the street. This site is a sustainable one in the heart of this rural service centre, and village housing here will be particularly appealing to those persons who wish or need to live close to village shops and services. The amended illustrative drawing demonstrates an ability to deliver 10 dwellings on the site and to provide an eclectic mix of house types to include detached and semi-detached houses as well as bungalows. Returning to the issue of access, detailed discussions have taken place with the Highways Authority in relation to the pedestrian crossing. Following consideration of a revised access design forming part of this application, the Highway Authority is satisfied that development could proceed without the need to reposition the crossing, and that I see is confirmed on your green sheet this evening. I understand that this has now been finally confirmed, as it has been, and I'm therefore able to assure members that there are no highway objections to the crossing remaining in situ or to the development as a whole. We regard this as a highly significant position, having regard to the support expressed by the Parish Council, subject to there being no Highway Authority objection. So we appreciate the support in that respect from the Parish Council. The application ensures that there will be sufficient provision for all off-street parking associated with the garage, which will be retained as a local service and employment site. Support for the officer recommendation would therefore be appreciated. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Giddings.
Councillor Gray. If Susan wants to come back.
Councillor Gray.
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. Just want to go back to my argument on the last one. Brownfield site, extra houses in the local area. Well, that's it, really. It's a brownfield site. Let's build on it. It'll save us building on greenfield sites. Thank you.
Right, Councillor McWilliams.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm very pleased that there is no need to remove that crossing. Normally I'd be jumping up and down, but it's better prospect than what we saw yesterday, where you go further down the bend there and the children accessing that road to get to school may not actually use the crossing if it was moved where it was originally thought it should be, which is further and nearer to the shop. So I'm quite pleased that Highways, from that perspective, have said what they're doing. And I shall be voting in favour of this application.
Further speakers? Councillor Fairley.
Thank you, Chair. No, it's nice to see something come in front of us where the Parish Council is fully behind the application. It's been reduced in numbers. There's been engagement there, so I would like to second Councillor Gray's approval. Thank you.
Other speakers? If there are no further speakers, we have a proposer, Councillor Gray, Councillor McWilliams to second. Councillor Fairley to second. Thank you for that. I shall take the vote. So it will be on conditions as on page 70. I don't think I should have normally offered the officer a chance to say anything, but before I take the vote, but don't think there's anything that she wishes to add, so that's right. So it's the conditions as per page 70. And in view of the the highways problem, those in favour, please show. That is unanimous. That is approved. Right, we now, having done A4, we move on to A5. Which is page 85.
96.
86, I'm told. 96, well, 85 is the drawing, so 86 is the...
96.
Sorry, Cockaine's Lane's the very one that we were doing. Yes, thank you for that.
Laurie wants to say something.
Yes, before we...
in the case of this 124 Wellesley Road, we couldn't get in it, we couldn't get to look round it, we don't know what the safety options are or anything inside it, so I move we don't deal with this today and wait till we can actually see inside it.
I think I'd rather hear the argument and then we'll take as an option as deferment, because... And the reason I'm saying that, for planning terms, externally, it's not altering at all. Although you make a good point, we didn't get inside it. Yeah, I think I'll take it, but with the option that you will be able to defer it if and when we don't do it. So, yeah. So I'll turn to the officers for, this is 16-01353, and it's 124 Wellesley Road.
Thank you, Chair. Yep, the application is 124 Wellesley Road, Clacton, and relates to the conversion of the residential property into a house of multiple occupation for occupation by 6 unrelated adults. The property was previously used in an unauthorised manner as a HMO by the previous owners. Enforcement action was taken in respect of a planning contravention notice, and the use has ceased and there's no one living there at present. The new owners have now taken over the property and refurbished it to a fairly good standard. Planning permission is only required today due to the fact that the council have issued a district-wide Article 4 direction removing the rights for people to convert to a house in multiple occupation for up to 3 to 6 residents. Elsewhere in the country, this type of application for 6 residents would not normally require planning permission, but the council has removed those rights to enable the council to retain control over these sorts of developments, so we can assess the conditions and assess the standard of the management procedures in place. So the site in question is located on the eastern side of Wellesley Road, approximately 750 metres to the north of Clacton Town Centre, about 350 metres from the train station, which is to the south. The area is a mixture of Victorian housing, semi-detached properties, terraced housing, and there's also been a number of changes of uses to flats and HMOs in the vicinity. There's also a social club located on the opposite side of Wellesley Road and retail outlets at the crossroads at Harrow Road. So again, you can see the aerial image of the site. There's there's an area of amenity to the rear. There's a bus stop located directly opposite the site, and there's also unrestricted parking on the western side of Wellesley Road. This is the front elevation of 124 Wellesley Road. It's a Victorian detached property with bay windows. There's a side passage to the side which leads to the rear amenity space. Forecourt parking for approximately 2 cars. Photo of the amenity space. It's recently been cleared by the new owners. This area is hard standing, and the area here has been seeded, ready for amenity use by the proposed occupants. And that shows the side passage where residents can access the rear amenity space. So inside, this is a photo at the ground floor showing the corridor leading to 2 of the individual rooms. It's a photo within one of the rooms at ground floor, which shows that each property has a ensuite bathroom, a small area for refrigeration, washing facilities, and a hand basin there. Photo of the ensuite, recently refurbished. This is a photo of one of the rooms at first floor, I believe, which shows that they are fairly spacious and provided with good light, which meets the requirements of the HMO licence. This is the photo of the communal kitchen area, which is again has recently been refitted. You've got 2 new ovens there, and also washing facilities and a sitting area for residents. The proposed block plan shows bins to the rear, parking for 2 cars to the front, I would say, and the amenity space to the rear. To the south of the site is an existing unit which contains flats and further flats to the north. In terms of the internal accommodation, at ground floor there's 3 units, each with ensuite facilities, all over or way in excess of the 8.5 square metres size, which is recommended as a minimum in the Essex County Council Code of Conduct for HMOs. And these 2 ground floor units have direct access to the rear amenity space. All other units will have to use the side passage. At first floor, again, 2 large units with ensuite facilities and a communal kitchen area for residents to utilise. And at second floor, there's 1 unit with an ensuite facility and a large window which enables access out onto the extension to the rear, which provides a means of escape from that area. So in terms of the merits of the scheme, I think the key issue first is to state that the Article 4 direction that we've served district-wide doesn't say no to these sorts of development. We have to assess them against the policy and the merits of the scheme. I think given the current shortage of affordable homes in the district, this type of temporary accommodation provides, or short-term accommodation provides, it's a good need in society for this type of use. And it's one that the NPPF, National Planning Policy Framework, is supportive of. Looking at the local plan policy, the most relevant local plan policy is HD10, which talks about the conversion of dwellings into flats, HMO units and bedsits. This is a criteria-based policy, so I'll just go through the criteria. The first criteria states that the building, if a dwelling, should have a gross floor area of 110 square metres. In this case, it's 130 square metres in size. And as I said, the bedrooms range from 16.4 square metres to 23.6 square metres, which is in excess of the 8.5 minimum required. The second criteria talks about it shouldn't involve the subdivision of a family dwelling house within a frontage of entirely single-family dwellings. So in terms of this section of Wellesley Road, the character is not single dwelling houses. It's got a number of existing HMOs, retail outlets, retail and commercial units. So I think the conversion of this property wouldn't be out of character in this location on the edge of the Clacton town centre. The third criteria talks about it does not involve the total or partial conversion to bed-sitting rooms and would not result in an intensity that would harm the character of the adjoining area and the amenity of adjoining residents. In this case, these aren't bedsit units. They're used. A bedsit is defined as a room used for sleeping where some of the basic facilities for food are provided within the room. Wherein a HMO, the building is used for sleeping and contains a communal area. So in this case, as the basic facilities are provided on a communal basis, they're not defined as bedsits. In respect to the amenity level of residents, as I said, each room is served by windows, good level of light, good size, and the council's HMO team have issued a licence and said that the work was completed to a high standard which complies with the council's HMO regulations and the Housing Act 2004. Criteria 4 talks about the external appearance of the dwelling house. would be maintained, and any extension works would not materially harm the character. As the chairman stated, there's no external changes taking place to the building. It's all internal in terms of the change of use. And in terms of the local residents' amenity, due to the detached nature of the building and the fact the proposal would not be significantly different to a standard house-to-house relationship, given that only 6 residents will reside in the building, the impact upon local residents adjoining the property would not be diminished. And it also has to be considered that the 2 properties adjoining the site are also in flat use. So there's a number of people in the adjoining properties as well. Criteria 5 talks about highway safety and arrangements for off-street parking. In this case, we have received an objection from Essex County Council due to the shortfall in parking provision. As I stated, there's probably room for 2 parking spaces to the front, and with 6 residents. It's considered that HMOs do tend to have low car ownership, and the fact that the site is in close proximity to the town centre, within walking distance of local shopping facilities, transport routes, there's a bus stop opposite the site, it's within close distance to the railway station, that a shortfall in parking provision in this location would be acceptable. And this stance is also consistent with appeal decisions and other developments where we've approved 1-bedroom units within town centre locations. And we would also secure cycle storage, which will help to alleviate against these issues. And the second to last criteria talks about private amenity space. It's considered the amenity space to the rear is sufficient. It would give residents sufficient space for drying clothes and amenity. And as I said, in terms of the possible noise disturbance to residents, the new owners, who are the applicants, are experienced in providing these types of HMOs, and they adhere to a strict code of conduct and practice for residents. Each resident is provided with a new welcome pack listing do's and don'ts, and they are given warning procedures. And there's also frequent site visits made by the officers who run the company. And also the neighbouring residents are provided with 24-hour contact numbers for management company, so to report any issues of any concerns arising from the premises. So given that the development is considered to meet these criteria, a proposal for 6 unrelated adults to live within the premises, and given that the applicants are experienced in operating these HMOs and work to a robust management plan, the application is recommended for approval, subject to the following conditions, which would restrict the occupation by adults only. No children would be allowed to reside, and no more than 6 residents at any one time. And also we would secure the approved plans and the applicant's management plan and new tenants welcome pack as part of the conditions. So the recommendation is one of approval. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, the only speaker I have is the portfolio holder for housing, Councillor Honeywood.
Thank you, Chairman. There is insufficient parking to meet the needs of a 6-bedroom HMO. As you will have seen, this property has a concreted forecourt with parking for 2 vehicles. Some say 1. Where will vehicles owned by other residents park? The answer appears to be, and I quote from the report, occupiers of HMOs tend to have very low levels of car ownership. I was also told during my visit that tenants would probably not have cars. I'll return to this assumption later. However, I think it is important to say that Essex County Council Highways disagree and oppose this application, saying experience shows that provision of fewer spaces creates additional parking in the highway, conflict with existing residents, and increased braking and turning movements in the highway increases the risks of collisions. You will have seen the location of the property. It is hardly a quiet road with plenty of parking in neighbouring roads. I believe that the location of this application has the potential to expose vulnerable people to drugs, gangs and exploitation, as its location is close to clusters of HMOs in Clacton. The report before you states Wellesley Road does not contain solely single-family dwellings. The road contains a number of existing HMOs. I can't argue with that. Indeed, there are many more in the town centre. Who will be living in this property? I was told during my visit that they would be looking at TDC to provide homeless tenants, and if they didn't, other councils would be approached. This means residents who may well have drug and alcohol problems moving in with no connection to the area, isolated from family and friends, and any support services they may have had elsewhere. Now, to put this combination close to other HMOs whose occupants may well have drug and or alcohol problems, and you have a recipe for disaster. Remember, they will be restricted to the very area where there is street drinking and antisocial behaviour, because tenants are not expected to have cars. I suppose you could say my view on this application is just speculation. However, a conversation I had during my visit and the report gives a clear impression of what is expected. I raised concerns during my visit to the property and was shown the CCTV cameras and told about the manager who would visit regularly. In answer to that, I would say CCTV cameras, if enforced, will only serve to drive problems onto the streets and out of the property. A manager visiting regularly will, in my opinion, have little or no effect. Indeed, properties have had live-in managers and still failed to deal with drug, alcohol and antisocial issues. The report talks about a welcome pack listing do's and don'ts whilst living at the property, warning procedures about disturbance and nuisance, occupants being required to sign a waiver upon entering tenancy, explaining that they are aware of their social responsibility, and if persistent antisocial behaviour takes place, eviction will follow. I also see that neighbouring residents are going to be provided with a 24-hour contact number for the management company, so as to allow for reporting on any issues arising from the property. Where is the 24-hour contact number based, and what will they do when they get the call? Clearly, the problems faced by Clacton Town Centre residents are expected to be repeated here. As you know, this council has had to pour taxpayers' money into tackling street drinking and antisocial behaviour in Clacton. An Article 4 direction has been put in place by TDC to control the proliferation of HMOs and the effect they have. Approval of this application will simply add to that proliferation and do nothing to help anyone, including the people who have to live in them. I ask that you refuse this application pro bono omnium for the good of all. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm going to ask for speakers whether... Nothing to add. Well, I've got a question, if I might. On a previous application, we've just said that we can't condition the age. We can't say that these properties are for old folk, and yet the second condition here says it's going to be occupied by adults only. I'm not quite sure. Probably it will fall that they will be adults only, but can we put it in the conditions? I don't think we can.
This is it's a condition that's been used on a number of other HMO appeal decisions that I've reviewed as part of this application. I think because it's a HMO and the rooms are smaller and they would only accommodate a single bed, I think the condition would be reasonable in this sense and would meet the condition, the tests of the condition circular.
Right. Okay. Councillor Bennison.
Thank you, Chairman. I was very interested to see that Councillor Honeywood was able to make a visit to this property, because when we went on our site visit yesterday and we arrived there at a time where someone was supposed to be there to let us in, there was no one there, and we waited for quite a while before having to go off. I have some concerns about this property because I'm not able to ascertain that there are sufficient fire escapes. I notice on the ground floor plan, the rear room actually has access to the back door, so that would be the secondary fire escape, which is not accessible to other users. So that makes the whole house then only have one point of access and escape. And should there be fire alarms in an HMO? I haven't seen any reference to fire alarms being installed in the building.
Yeah, those issues are covered by the HMO licence, which has been granted by our council. The application also has been subject to a building regulations initial notice, which has been passed. So the actual use of the property and its layout has received a HMO licence by the council in terms of its layout and regulations, and has also received building control approval for the refurbishment internally.
Do you wish to come back, Councillor Benson?
Yes, well, as someone who used to run a small hotel, we had to have two exits and fire alarms in situ. So I'm quite surprised that it's been passed with only one fire escape and with no fire alarm. And I'm also loath to support this without actually having seen inside the property. So I would like to propose that we defer this so that we can go back to visit the property to be satisfied that in everything is as it should be.
I think I'm taking Councillor Gray as the proposer for that, but Councillor Benison backing it up at the present moment. I'm going to ask the solicitor, though, if there's any comments that she wants to make at this time.
Yeah, I just wanted to remind the committee about what can and can't be a material planning consideration. Building regulations, as Matt rightly pointed out, is dealt with by the building control team. That's a separate issue to the planning considerations. And just picking up on what Councillor Honeywood has said, crime and disorder is also generally not regarded as a material planning consideration because it's dealt with, again, under other legislation, and there's lots of controls in that respect. So you just need to be careful that you're not straying onto matters that aren't actually within your remit for looking at.
Thank you. Councillor Baker?
Thank you, Chairman. Having seen the front of the property, I don't think you'd get two cars on there without jutting down to the pavement. Essex County Council Highways Department have actually objected. And in order to accept the proposal, they've said they need to see the results of a full parking survey carried out between 1 a.m. and 5 a.m. I'm just wondering if that's the correct time that they want to do it, because there'll be plenty of suitable on-street parking spaces. And then, on receipt of further information, that authority will be happy to reconsider this application. We're told that we need to go on site visits before we make a deliberation at committee. I saw the outside of a property. I'd like to see the inside. I agree with the deferment. I'd also like to see the survey that Essex County Council Highways wish to take place, so that we can then make an informed decision. I think there's insufficient parking. People do have cars, regardless of how close they live to a town centre. So I would support the deferment for a certain period of time before we make a fully informed decision. Thank you, Chairman.
Right, Councillor Fairley's next on my list. No, she's going to Councillor McWilliams. Right.
Thank you, Chairman. In some ways I support what you're saying, but I agree with what we've been already informed from our solicitor. It's the highways bit that is concerning me, and it is the parking. That's been highlighted by Councillor Honeywood as well. And I do think we should be taking that quite seriously. It's a very busy road, that road. And funny that the Times that you have just mentioned, that they actually did a survey. I find that very hard. But we always have an argument about highways not supporting how we think about something. This time they are actually saying they oppose, they object, and I think we should be supporting that from that perspective.
Any further comments?
I'll make a comment.
Yes, Councillor Heaney.
I have to say, I entirely agree with Councillor Williams. When did last Highways disagree with something? I mean, they must really disagree with this, because they never, ever, ever disagree with anything. And I think from that point of view, I would think that you should be turned down on the parking issue.
could I ask the solicitor for final comment before I take the vote?
Yeah, just to clarify on that, obviously highways is a material planning consideration and they are a statutory consultee, so it's very important that you take into account what they've said, which you do on all applications. So.
Yes, I'll give you one more crack.
Well, no, I'm just coming back in view of that comment. Can I therefore propose that we actually refuse the application on that one ground, if it's possible to do so? I see Charlotte's thinking.
I'd second that.
Well, I have a proposer and a seconder that we defer it. I'll take a vote on that, and then I will take a vote on on your proposal. So the first proposal is that we defer the decision. Those in favour, please show. This is on deferment. 1, 2. Supporting that, and those against deferment, that the deferment is lost. In that case, I now have a new proposition that we refuse the application. Councillor McWilliams proposing, and do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Heaney seconds it. And do you want any further debate on refusal before I take the vote? Nobody indicates that. In that case, yes, we will need to know the grounds for the refusal. Obviously, the first one will be highways.
Yes, that's correct, as far as I'm concerned.
And are there any further points that anybody... Yes, Councillor Gray. Fire safety has been... Yeah.
Yeah, they're not material planning considerations, so they're dealt with under building control. So yeah, the parking shortfall is an appeal. Well, we can defend it on appeal. Yeah. It would be along the same lines as the highway objection there, which states that there's not sufficient parking, and the risk of highway conflict. So yeah, there'd be the reasons.
And John Holmes wants to say something.
Councillor Holmes?
Yeah, it says here the application has been referred to the Planning Committee at the request of Councillor Stevenson and Honeywood. The application seeks planning permission to convert a dwelling. It's already been converted. So what is it, retrospective permission or?
Yeah, the use hasn't commenced, so it's been refurbished inside. It's been set out as how they intend to use it as a HMO, but the use hasn't commenced. So there's no breach of planning control at the moment. If the use was commenced and there were people living in there, we'd have a breach of planning control. But at the moment, there isn't any breach.
So we just can refuse the actual point of converting the house, can we?
Yeah, the application is for the change of use of the property to a HMO. So the proposal is there to be assessed, and if you wish to refuse it, then that's your recommendation and your resolution.
Right. In that case, no further comments. So the vote is to refuse the application, principally on this question of the support from highways, or the lack of support from highways, is the principal point. And Councillor Gray's point, which I think we're all we agree with, but it's not part of our planning decision. So, right, those in favour of refusal. I've started, Councillor, so I'm going to continue, as they say. Those for refusal, please show. 1, 2, 3, 4. It is unanimous.
Article 5 or
Article 4.
Article 4. Yeah.
Right. to A6, which was... We now move to A6, which is on page 103, and it is application number 16106312, and this is a detail application for the site in Roxburgh Road, where we seem to be going very often. The 3 properties that have outline permission, this is the details that we're going to have. Right.
Hey, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, as you say, this is a detailed application relating to the reserve matters on plot 2. Plots 3 and 1 have already been granted the reserve matters approval. So the application site is located on the southwestern side of Roxburgh Road. This site here was granted outline planning permission in 2013 by members. Members requested to see the reserve matters details. The property on plot 1 has already been approved and is undergoing construction at the moment. Plot 3 has been approved recently by members, and again, work is waiting to be commenced on that plot. So the site itself was former paddock land. It's largely laid to grass and obviously is part of a current construction site. That's the dwelling on plot 1 that's nearing completion. That's a photo of the middle plot, plot 2, which we're assessing this evening. The ground it's a bare site. It's just laid to grass. There's no frontage. There's a small hedgerow to the rear. And plot 3 has been approved recently by members, and that was the one with the trees that needed to be protected via protective measures. So this application proposes a detached dwelling largely in line with the 2 either side, so it forms that linear development, completes the development of the site. Proposed access from Roxburgh Road, turning circle or turning head at the front of the dwelling with an attached garage to the side. The design largely follows the proposals on the other 2 plots. Twin gabled frontage, tiled roof, attached lean-to style garage with a canopied front door entrance. And these are 4-bedroom dwellings with sufficient, quite large areas at ground floor, kitchen, diners and living areas. So the proposal comes before members. There's no trees on the plot which are thought to be affected. The design relates acceptably to those either side. Highways are happy because there's parking, there's turning on site, and given that the development follows the established line and completes the development, it's recommended for approval.
Thank you very much. Councillor Gray.
Just like I say, in my opinion, this is a non-starter, isn't it? We just say yes, because it's there is no argument with it as far as I'm concerned. Thanks.
I suspect that might be the general feeling, but I will hear all councillors. Councillor Fairley.
I would agree with that and would like to second that. Thank you.
Any further points?
No, I'm just joking. Sorry. Oh, thank you.
I take it the officer doesn't wish to comment, in which case we shall vote with Councillor Gray being the proposer, Councillor Fairley being the seconder. Those in favour, please show. And those against?
John's abstaining.
John's abstaining.
John didn't go on the site visit.
Oh, wasn't on.
You weren't there.
No.
Of course you missed
This
it.
is the one that he has missed. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Yes, weren't there.
So, right, okay, that is approved. Now, page 109, this is planning application 1601442. This is detail plan, it says, and it's land adjacent to 109 Harwich Road, Mistley. And Suzanne's got this one, I think.
Right, okay, as mentioned, this is a reserved reserved matters application for 4 dwellings, and it follows the outline approval that was granted by committee in January 2015. The application has been brought to committee at the request of members at the time the outline approval was given. So the site is located on the corner of Harwich Road and Stourbridge Avenue, but fronts onto Harwich Road. Land towards the rear of the site came before members at the last committee, and there was a resolution to grant outline planning permission for up to 70 dwellings. The site lies in this location here. It's adjacent to 109 Harwich Road and forms part of a larger field. It's enclosed by vegetation along the front and the side boundaries. So in terms of the photograph, that's looking at it from the junction with Stourbridge Avenue, and that shows the site itself. So it's a flat site with nothing on it, and that is the view from Harwich Road. So you can see the existing vegetation, and again the side boundary of Stourbridge Avenue, which shows the existing hedge. And that shows the relationship with 109 Harwich Road, so you'll see that it's separated from the application site by a large detached garage. And this shows the proposed layout. So you've got 4 detached dwellings situated in a linear form facing Harwich Road with one single point of access at this point here. This plan shows the proposed landscaping. The hedge along Stourbridge Avenue will be retained, with new planting along the boundary with Harwich Road, and that's to ensure that the visibility display is achieved. All the proposed dwellings have sufficient parking and garden space in accordance with the council's adopted standards. And this is the design of the 2 dwellings on either end of the application of the row. They're long and narrow dwellings of fairly traditional design. And internally, at first floor level, they have 4 bedrooms. And this shows the 2 dwellings within the middle. So whilst they're different, all of varying designs, again, it is traditional design, which is considered to be in keeping with the character of the area. And again, with the layout, again, it is a 4-bedroomed dwelling. And the top shows the indicative street scene, so you see how they relate to each other, and the garages which are set back from the front elevations of each of the properties in that location there. So officers are of the opinion that the application is acceptable in all respects and therefore recommend approval. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right, let's have a look. For this one, I don't have any speakers. So, councillors, yes, councillor.
Thank you, Chair. I don't see anything wrong with this. So, therefore, I would like to propose approval. Thank you, Chair.
Right. Councillor Gray. Right. No speakers either against it or for it. Right, Councillor McWilliams.
Can I just say one thing? I did notice that the Parish Council have made a recommendation that they'd like to see an inclusion of a pedestrian access from the development to the pedestrian footway down the bottom end there, which is the development we saw on the previous occasion, and the provision of a street light at the development. Is that possible to condition that? I don't know if officers are able to do that, but they've obviously made comment, and I think it's a sensible comment. But, hey.
Yes. I don't know, Councillor Baker, whether you wish to think, but I seem to think we walked on that footpath. I can't see.
I think what Councillor, sorry, Chair, I think what Mistley Parish Council have sort of asked for, if you like, is sort of the bottom left-hand corner where it says something like Cursmon or something and easement. I think that's where Is it where? Yeah, that's right. That's it. That's where they're asking for a pedestrian access, I think.
Is it? Yeah.
From memory, there was quite a big tree there. If we could go to that picture. We've got a picture of that corner, I think, haven't we?
Yeah, ridiculous. They can walk round the corner, can't they?
That one.
The tree, you'd have to take the tree out. You'd lose that really, wouldn't you? You'd just lose the vegetation. I think people will walk down the path personally.
There is a footpath all the way round. Are they just saying that there might be a short circuit between the house and the footpath rather than...
Can I make a comment if nobody else wants to?
Anybody else?
Can I say something?
Yes, please.
I actually think that people can walk over the front entrance and walk round the front. It's hardly a marathon hike. And isn't there a footpath down that side? You know, and all you do is just take out vegetation in the front by knocking through there. You know. Yeah. You're a good parish councillor.
Right, I'm going to ask Suzanne if she wished to make a comment on that. But,
just a comment on that suggestion. In terms of the pedestrian access, I think officers' view is that the loss of the tree or the vegetation along that corner would outweigh any benefit there would be from a pedestrian access in that location. And furthermore, in terms of the street lighting, I'm unsure whether they're referring to street lights within the site or on the outside the site. But either way, if it's within the site, the development's not of the scale that would require any street lighting because it's unlikely to be adopted road. And again, if it's outside the site, then it's outside of the control of the applicant and therefore not reasonable for us to impose such a requirement.
Right. Councillor Benison, then I'll take
Thank
Councillor
you,
Baker.
There's just one observation. There is a street light on the road already on the opposite side of the road. And if you took out some of that vegetation to link onto the path, there's no footpath in that side road. His name I can't remember. And I think it would, if there were children coming out through that hedge, they would be vulnerable to traffic coming down Stourbview Avenue. So I think it would be better to leave it as it is.
I think so. Is Councillor Baker?
I was just going to make a comment with regard to the street light, actually, that Councillor Benison's been the one on the other side, but if you actually look further down the road, there are no street lights on the southern footpath anyway, and the housing goes all the way down just towards the, just past the junction with the road to go with Mistley Heath. So, and as we can't do anything about it, it's not a consideration, is it?
No, and it's County Council Highways.
I honestly thought, but the way that read, I did think it was further down inside, and I could understand that being further down, not on this access route. And I understand about the street light, it makes sense.
Right,
I needed to bring that forward. I just thought I had to.
You're a good parish.
Yes. Good supporter of parish councils. Right, I'm going to take a vote now. I have a proposal from Councillor Fowler, seconded by Councillor Gray, that the development should take place in the conditions as outlined on page 110 without any variations. Those in favour, please show. That will be unanimous. Again, that is approved. Thank you. We now go to A8, which has got great ramifications with A9, so I suspect that things said on one will be said on the other, so let's try and bring all our thoughts together and then we can vote on them separately as they're separate applications. Now, therefore, turn to the officer, and this is Heath Farm, Windmill Road, Bradfield. It's planning application 1601699 full. Right, I'm going to turn straight to the officer for that one then.
Right, thank you, Chair. As mentioned, the application is linked to the next item on the agenda, but whilst there are links, they can be considered separately. So I'll start with this application, which is a proposal for 2 dwellings in the rear garden of newly constructed dwellings on Windmill Road. So this plan shows the application site. So here are the 2 newly constructed dwellings, and the proposal is for the gardens of those dwellings as approved to be shortened and for 2 bungalows to be located within the rear gardens. They'll be served by an access that has been approved as part of the applications to the rear of the site. So if I show the plan in more context, may make a bit more sense. So you've got Windmill Road in this location, the 2 dwellings that are substantially completed, as you would have seen on the site. These are the 2 that are proposed under this current application. And to the rear of the site, you've got this area here, which has been granted, or permission has been granted for 6 bungalows, in July 2016, and followed by a reserved matters application granted in October 2016. And this plan did show the access as is shown on this plan. A further 4 dwellings in this location here has been granted in outline form, and that was granted in November 2016. So in terms of, this was an area review that was taken before the development commenced. So the dwellings, the site is, well, the whole area is in this location here. So that is a photograph looking into the site from Windmill Road. And that is a view looking towards proposed plot 1. So you would have noticed on the site visit that development hasn't commenced, but the sites have been, the fencing indicates where they will be. So it's been laid out in that sense. And that is a view looking towards proposed plot 2, which will be approximately where that digger is. And again, that's site of proposed plot 1. And that shows the relationship with the newly constructed dwelling. Shows the site of plot 2, so on the opposite side of the access road. And again, that is the relationship with the newly constructed dwelling and the existing dwellings along Windmill Road. In terms of design, both dwellings are of similar design. They're fairly traditional in appearance. Small units with 2 bedrooms. Adequate parking and garden space is provided for the proposed dwellings and also retained for the existing dwellings. And it is considered that given the approvals given for the development to the rear of the site, that the proposal would not appear out of character with the surrounding area, and therefore is recommended for approval. Thank you.
Right. Now, I don't have any speakers for or against from my...
Fairly. Zoe's going to speak.
Yes, I know she is, but I don't have anybody. I was just expecting somebody either to be speaking against or the parish council.
There
but
she
I
is,
don't.
she's over there.
Would you care to speak? Yes.
Thank you, Chairman. My name is Sue Cunningham, and I'm speaking on behalf of Bradfield Parish Council, of which I am chairman. There are 2 planning applications which the Planning Committee are considering this evening, which relate to the building of 2 bungalows in the gardens of 2 large detached houses which have recently been constructed. The parish council did not object to the construction of these two houses, as they were in keeping with the surrounding area and had large gardens which matched the gardens of their neighbours. However, this new application is quite different. The space taken by the two new buildings would make the gardens of the original houses considerably smaller and out of character with neighbouring properties. Combined with the building of a further 10 dwellings at the back of this land, it would create an urban-style estate totally out of keeping with the village style of the rest of Bradfield. The planning official's report refers on many occasions to an approved housing estate development, but there has never been a single planning application for a housing estate by a single developer. What we have had is a series of piecemeal applications from different developers, which, if all approved, would create an estate. It is the parish council's view that this kind of development by stealth is extremely dangerous. The official's report talks of logical development, but there is nothing logical about this at all. The plans put forward for the two bungalows do not take account of the previous decision taken by the planning committee in relation to the original houses. They completely ignore the fact that one of the conditions for approval was that the gardens should extend as far back from the road as that of their neighbours. What are we to think as a parish council if the conditions which we supported can so easily be overthrown? How can we put our trust in the planning system and encourage the people living in our village to do the same? The officials accept that the site falls outside of the village developments of the 2007 local plan, and that's shown in the 2013-2033 preferred options consultation document, and is therefore technically contrary to the development plan. They also accept that the overall housing development has been approved in phases by differing landowners, and that the different developments could not be considered as one parcel of land. They use this argument to support the lack of necessity to provide affordable housing within the area, but they still insist on calling the area an approved housing estate. You can't have it both ways. They also claim that the Heath Farm development has fundamentally changed the character of the village. Now, anyone who drives the full length of Bradfield, and remember it's well over 1.2 miles long, and if you look to your right and your left as you're going through Bradfield, you'll realise what nonsense this is. Bradfield is still primarily a village with a linear form. We hope very much that the Planning Committee will recommend that this application is refused. Our fear is that if it is approved, it will set a dangerous precedent for other parts of the village. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Ms. Cunningham. Now, a ward member, I know, is a member of this committee. I don't think we need to make her sit at the table, but I know she wishes to speak on it. So would you care to go down there so it's on record, or will you prefer to do it here?
No, I'm quite happy doing it there. I'm not voting. Can I sit in the audience afterwards, or do I have to?
Well, she can vote, can't she?
No, not if she's speaking again.
No. Okay, righto. Well,
can I just clarify? You're obviously stating that you're predetermined if you're speaking against yes, so you want to leave once you've spoken. Yeah, you can sit in room 34.
Anything but.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Thank you, everyone. I'm speaking this evening against items A8 and A9. I'm speaking just once, but my comments will apply to both the Bradfield applications in front of you tonight. They are the same site and the outcomes are linked. I was requested by the Parish Council to call these applications in due to extreme concerns for overcrowding on the site, together with the proposed development being out of character for Bradfield. Bradfield is a rural village with single narrow country lanes leading onto a long main street. The development throughout the village is in main linear in form and not housing estate settings. There are huge concerns for how the piecemeal applications on this greenfield area have been dealt with in terms of approval process and reasoning, together with the actual progress of development on the site without correct variance permissions being in place. It seems to some that the process has been unfair and has totally undermined any trust the parish council may have had in the planning system. For you to clearly understand why, I should explain that the original permission granted for this greenfield site was for 2 houses facing Windmill Road, conditioned to include long gardens matching neighbouring properties to fit in with a rural setting along this narrow country lane in a village location. And clearly the approved site plan for these properties shows well-appointed family houses with long, wide, cojoining gardens. With the condition in place, the parish council felt safe in the understanding that any further applications coming forward for the site would be considered in the same vein, and that the condition for the gardens would safeguard the village against backland development at the site. These 2 houses, with their approved site plan, in keeping with the conditions, the rural setting and the street scene, are, believe it or not, the same 2 houses that you saw at the front of the site yesterday, split by an access road already leading to 10 bungalows yet to be built but approved by the council under delegated powers, both front houses now having high-fenced small gardens and 2 plots already prepared at the rear. So the parish council and neighbouring properties in Windmill Road feel badly let down. The approved site drawing and conditioned long gardens for the 2 houses they thought they were getting, which would match in with the existing houses in rural setting, bear no resemblance whatsoever to what will be 14 properties at this site if these 2 bungalows are approved by you tonight. There has been no condition variance sought in advance of any preparation of plots by the developer for 2 further bungalows, or to shorten the length of the gardens for the front 2 houses, or even to narrow the plots for the access road. Yet the gardens have been shortened, plots are already prepared, and the gardens have already been narrowed to take the constructed access road. This is the wrong order. To stop any further damage and to allow at least some rural character of the setting to remain, please refuse both agenda items A8 and A9. Keep the condition in place for the long gardens without any variance and refuse these 2 bungalows on the basis of overcrowding in a rural setting and out of character in this village location, together with being outside of the proposed development plan. The developer can then apply for a separate condition variance to just allow for the access road. At least the front 2 houses can then keep their long gardens as per the set conditions for these properties. The impact on the street scene will be less, and this rural site won't look so overcrowded with a lesser density. Surely the condition set for the gardens clearly shows the original intention, this together with the fact that the site is outside of the proposed development boundary. The subsequent approval for 6 and 4 bungalows behind the 2 houses given under delegated powers seems to me to go against all reasoning applied to the original approval of the front 2 houses. This feels very wrong to me, and I think as a committee we absolutely need to apply a cohesive approach across applications on a single site in future. Although these bungalows at the back of the site have been approved, if the front 2 houses at least can keep their long gardens, then we can still avoid this rural site looking like an urban housing estate. This is not an urban setting. This is not a high-density housing estate. Please refuse both applications, item A8 and A9 this evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now I have the agent, Mr. Richard Hawley, if he's here.
Thank you. Good evening, Chairman. Good evening, members. The following observations are relevant to both applications which are before you this evening. The first application relates to the provision of 2 bungalows on land immediately to the rear of an approved frontage development of 2 detached houses on Windmill Road and adjoining approved development of 10 bungalows to the immediate rear. The site itself falls within the settlement boundary of Bradfield in both the adopted and emerging plan and would be accessed from a private drive to be implemented as part of the aforementioned permissions. Indeed, with appropriate landscaping, the proposed bungalows would only be glimpsed from Windmill Road and instead be visually linked with the bungalow development to the rear. Whilst we acknowledge the local concerns previously expressed with regard to the larger development to the rear, the development under consideration this evening is modest and policy compliant in terms of its location, scale, and the amenity space provided. We also note the comments made with regard to the character created by the long gardens enjoyed by many of the properties along Windmill Road. However, this application should be assessed in the context of the development to its front and rear, which have already been approved. And having regard to the character of the adjoining approved developments, there should be no requirement within an already committed within an area already committed to the provision of additional village housing for garden sizes to be of uniform or comparable size, so long as the council's amenity space standards are met, as they are in this case. The application site is therefore characterised by the development to the front and rear, such that the proposed development would have no materially harmful effect on the character of the established frontage development along Windmill Road. This point is highlighted in the officer's report, which also identifies that the provision of 2 dwellings in this location would make sensible use of land within the village development boundary, make a modest contribution to village housing stock, and be fully compliant with both local and national policy. In the absence of any materially harmful impacts arising from the proposed development, your support of the officer recommendation is respectfully requested. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Would you care to comment on any of the talks, Suzanne? Or no, not at this time.
I would like to support.
Yes, indeed. Councillor Heaney.
I totally disagree with what the agents just said. Sorry, I didn't see that still on. This development should be judged by the backland development behind it. The planning permission should be judged by the houses on the front as they were passed. The houses that we have seen now with these back bits cut off are too big for these small gardens they now have. The houses were given planning permission with long gardens to fit into the street scene and the linear development. The bungalows we're discussing are small, with rather mean gardens, and smaller than the other bungalows. This is overcrowding, unlike the rest of the village, and I really cannot vote for this, and I'd like to vote for it to be turned down, can't think of the right word.
Refused.
Refused, thank you so much. I'd like to suggest.
I'll second that.
Thank you.
Right, I've got Councillor Hone down to speak. Do you wish?
Yes, please. The 2 houses in the front, if I can ask the officers, when were they given permission to actually be built? You know, when was the planning allowed?
The date of registration of the first 2 houses was the 6th of March 2015. Copy of that permission seen here.
Yeah, they were given consent on 1st of May in 2015.
Okay, and can you tell me when the delegated permission was given for these back ones? Because it's totally wrong. There's totally something should be looked into over there, because they're assuming that they've given permission to the back, providing they change the fronts. Now they've already built them, and they've already started to dig up the gardens. So I'm not being. I think it's a cowboy outfit, and I think they've done it all wrong. And I would like something to be done about it, or at least looked into. Sorry.
Right, so it might be useful to run through a timeline of what has occurred on the site. So the 2 front dwellings were granted permission in, as I said, 1st of May 2015. Following that, in July 2016, there was an outline application granted for these 6 dwellings in this location.
Was it delegated?
It was delegated, yes. And following the outline permission, in October 2016, we granted detailed reserve matters application for these 6 dwellings here, which showed the access going here. At that point, it meant that these 2 dwellings couldn't be in accordance with the built in accordance with the approved plans because they have the access going through the middle of them. Of their properties, yes, because the original consent for these 2 didn't include that access. So that was an issue, and therefore this is what the next application on the agenda is to deal with. So, so the next application will deal with the access. It seeks an amendment to this application with the access to include the access point there. Then, with regards to the rear of the site, in November 2016, outline permission was granted for 4 dwellings to the back of the site. So what you've got at the moment is these were granted permission with access in this location, which means that the 2 plots on the front cannot be built in accordance with the approved plans, and they are not built in accordance with the approved plans, as you've correctly mentioned. And obviously, it will depend on the outcome of this of these applications on what action may be taken in the future.
Personally, I don't think we should be voting on any permission whatsoever, because this has been done wrong. And what should be looked into, as far as I'm concerned, is the fact that they give planning permission before they even had, and by the way, they've already built that road. We was there today, and that road has been built. So something is drastically wrong with this planning. I don't know. You say it was 16 and it was delegated. I honestly believe there's something wrong.
I just wanted some clarification, actually. First, the first 2 properties that were built with the condition of the long gardens, what have they lost, and what is the size of their gardens now? It's a full application, so the 2 bungalows, what is the size of their gardens to be, and are they policy compliant, please? And just so I get this right in my head, and I think Councillor Holmes has touched on it, the first 2 properties are given permission with long gardens and access in a different way. Then a further application for the 6 at the back is made and approved with an access road, and then subsequently get detailed. And then the last bit is the 4 at the back, which is an outline at the moment. So by granting the permission of the 6, we're sort of allowing the access road to be built that overrides the condition. Does that make sense? And also, if we are minded to approve, refuse, whatever we do, if we are minded to approve the 2 bungalows, and I'm not saying we are, and I'm not suggesting we do at the moment, does that then make the second application a bit redundant because we've got rid of the condition for the long gardens?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, Suzanne will try and measure the garden areas for you while I do the talking bit for a moment. The planning permission for the 10 at the back, if we just combine the 4 and the 6 for a moment, granted planning permission for the access road that has now been put in place. So there's nothing unauthorised about the implementation of that planning permission and therefore the provision of that access road. what's gone wrong, if you like, in Councillor Holnes's words, is that the implementation of that planning permission at the back and the building of that road means that the permission for the 2 bungalows at the front, the 2 bungalows have been built in a manner which is unauthorised because they're not able to comply with the approved plans. And that's a matter that the developer needs to resolve. When you're determining plan, of houses, when the council is determining planning applications, it can't take into account whether an application is retrospective or forward-looking. So you're not able to kind of punish people for doing things that are unauthorised. You need to just determine the application on its merits, looking at the usual policy issues and policy compliance. So we've brought the 2 applications before you tonight. The first one is that we're looking at the moment is for 2 additional bungalows, and members have been raising planning concerns about the size of the gardens, the nature of the development, the character of it, and that impact on the rest of the village. And then if that were to be refused, I think your final question was, would it make the second application redundant? Sorry, if it was approved. No, it's the other way around, really. If the first one, if the one for the 2 bungalows is approved, then it would follow logically. There would be some logic to approving the second application, because that allows the 2 bungalows at the front to remain with smaller gardens and with a road running between them. If the 2 bungalows that we're looking at the moment are refused, then the second application becomes redundant, because I think from the discussion you're saying that one of your concerns would be the cramped nature of development and the loss of the garden to the 2 bungalows at the front. And so presumably committee, having refused those, wouldn't then want to grant, it would also want to refuse the 2 houses at the front with smaller gardens. It still wouldn't resolve matters entirely, because the road has been built between the 2 houses, and that would remain unauthorised. And so in the event that planning permission is refused for both applications, the applicant will have to find a way to resolve the matter of the road by making a further application just for the road. Potentially that would be a way to resolve it. I think Suzanne's got some numbers in terms of garden sizes. They're just totting up the totals.
Yeah, so in terms of garden sizes, the proposed bungalow, so this one here, has a garden size of 154 metres squared, and plot 2 has a garden size of 146 metres squared, both which is above the standard that is required as part of the policy. And in terms of the remaining dwellings, one will be retained, have 172 square metres, and the other would have 206 square metres. Again, above what is the 100 square metres that is required by policy.
The first 2 houses, was it a planning committee approval? Yes. It was. So even the first 2 was delegated. Not happy with this at all. Not happy with it at all. Sorry.
Right, Councillor Baker, and then I'm going to reserve the right to follow you up. Yes.
No, I think all the queries I have been answered. Thank you.
I think that, as far as I'm concerned, it's been highlighted by Kath. My particular bug with is these are 2 nice houses with sensible sized gardens that fit in with the rest of that road. To suddenly reduce the size of the gardens, not only by these suggested bungalows, but of course the original, where the road has been put, was also part of their estate or gardens. So it's dramatically reduced the land available for these two nice houses, and is therefore cramping it in. And I think Kath, for me, has put me right definitely now. The only way that could happen is to refuse these two bungalows so that it reverts back to nearly the size of the original planning permission. And then that means that the approved 4 and 6, the 10 properties, at that moment in time wouldn't have a legal right of way, so an application would then have to be put in for the road, which, I mean, as it has been virtually approved already, I would think would be forthcoming. But so that's the way I'm looking at it at the present moment. Councillor Bennison.
No, I think
You've read it right.
I think everybody's covered what I was going to say, really, too.
Right, Councillor Heath, nothing to say on it.
I think everybody's covered it, really.
Right. Right. Yes, Councillor.
I put up, we refuse.
And that is for the first one, that is A8. And that is the 2 bungalows in the back gardens. Please, yes. Right. Yes, Suzanne, sorry. Did you wish to say something?
Just that reasons for refusal
sorry,
will be required, please.
Right, yes. I think because of the effect that it had on the 2 houses at the front, how it has dramatically reduced their garden space as planned, and which means it's overcrowding in Windmill Road, where all the properties have very long gardens, so it's overcrowding definitely, and to my way of thinking, it does not fit in with the existing street scene. Now, whether that's sufficient, I shall look to my left to see whether that is sufficient for that one, because it has dramatically reduced, with taking the road out and now the 2 suggested bungalows.
Right. I think in terms of, I understand where you're coming from in reduction of the garden space as planned and it being overdevelopment. The issue with that as a reason for refusal is that all the dwellings meet the required standards. So I think the advice to you is that to go a step, I suppose, to take a different stance on that and to say that the proposed dwellings to the rear of the site and smaller gardens is out of character with the surrounding area, rather than going on an overdevelopment which cannot be justified in terms of the figures.
What was that for? Number 8 or number 6?
That's for A8. That's A8.
We're not talking about the 2 bungalows we're talking about.
Yes, we are. Yeah. Councillor Baker.
Chairman, it's been proposed that we refuse the application. If we're minded to refuse it, does that mean that A9 falls at the wayside then? Does it? Yes, Kath, could you?
I think it would be illogical, I think, to approve it, but you still need to determine it, so you need to consider it. Yeah.
Can I say something?
Yes, Councillor Heaney, then Councillor
I think we need some kind of policy, because these are great big, lovely houses stuck on tiddly little plots, which is totally out of keeping with the houses, particularly with when we had these long gardens. I know I've said all this already, but I do think that the council needs to amend its policies, so this can't happen again. You can't say that big houses are all right with 1,000 square feet or metres or whatever it is, because they're just not. You know, I mean, I know it's a bit bigger they have, but in future I think we've got to do something about this.
Sorry, can I just say something?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, Councillor Benson, then I'll take Councillor Home.
Thank you. Is this one of the instances where we can say that the benefits are outweighed by the disbenefits?
Well done, Liz. That's good.
Right, good. Councillor Holmes?
Yeah, as it happens, I was having a discussion this morning about delegated powers, because a lot of the time it's put in the paper that the planning committee has passed this, and we haven't. It's been delegated powers, it's done it. But that's another story. What I'm saying is that surely this should be looked at about why two houses that were given delegated permission. Now, that was the permission that they were given was for two houses, long gardens, with garages, whatever, but nothing about the back, nothing at all. So even if that plan, as delegated plan, would have come up in the applications, that's what we would have thought about it. So I don't think we was on when that was passed, because it was we didn't get much notice of it apart from what's in the paper on applications. Yeah. So what chance have we got of bringing that back when they go roughshod over it like that? It's just something wrong. I can't put my finger on it without saying things that I'm going to be... It's not even backyard development because they got no entrance to it.
Okay. Yeah, please.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
I think there's two different issues there, which I can understand your frustration. I think there's a couple of issues. One of them is when an application is delegated as opposed to committee, and one of them is when planning permission's been granted, and then something else happens which changes the position we thought we had. In terms of the first one, the scheme of delegation means that the vast majority of planning applications are dealt with by officers because this committee would never cope in an otherwise. And in this particular case, the application for the 10 at the back, the 6 and the 4 weren't called to committee, and neither were the 2 at the front, and in fact the parish council, I think, didn't object to the 2 at the front. So that's all just kind of very normal process. Yeah. Well, maybe they did. Yeah. Anyway, they weren't called in. We then had a kind of what we thought was a settled position, if you like. Planning permission was granted on the land at the back and the land at the front for the 2 houses out the front. But we can never prevent somebody coming forward with a further planning application to completely supersede something, to vary an application. You and I, everybody has a right to make an application anywhere. And when they do, that can change things. So in this particular case, I think you're indicating, and there's been some discussion that members generally, I think, were sort of happy, if you like, with the 2 houses with big gardens. They're less happy with the 2 houses with small gardens and 2 bungalows behind them. But the applicant is perfectly within his rights to make that application, and we have a duty as a local planning authority to determine it. You don't have to approve it, and it looks as if from the discussion you're heading towards wanting to refuse it. But that's just the process. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just how the system works.
I'm going to ask you whether this is wrong, whether this process is wrong. The 2 houses were passed, and that. The back ones then came in after that, before anything was even thought of about a road. Why? Why would you, delegated or planning, give permission for something in the back with no access whatsoever? I mean, it's got to be either something's wrong, something's illegally been done, and I'm going to say it, right, or the people that gave the delegated powers knew exactly what was going to happen before it happened. Yeah, sorry.
Okay. Yeah, I think if you've got a concern about process, then that's a discussion for another place and another time. Yeah, so if you've got a complaint about the way officers have dealt with it, that's absolutely fine, and it needs to be transparent. And if you want to make a complaint about that, it will certainly be looked into, because those matters are really serious, and it's important people do have faith in the system. Right. But I think to explain,
we've got to find a reason to stop these.
If I just finish, I think what's gone wrong, if you like, in using your phraseology, is that because the planning permissions at the back have been implemented, they've built the road, which is authorised, through the middle of a site.
When was it authorised?
Well, Suzanne ran through the dates, but the planning permission has been granted for the houses at the back, including an access road. Those applications included an access road to the highway. The problem that creates is that the houses at the front can no longer be built in accordance with their approved plans. Yes, and so that element of development is currently unauthorised. That is, if you like, a problem for the developer, and that's one he's trying to resolve through these applications. If this committee decides to refuse those applications, he's still got that issue to resolve, and there are ways he can go about doing that. But you, committee tonight, just needs to consider whether or not those applications are acceptable or not in planning terms. And if it leaves the developer with a bit of an issue to resolve in a way that's not, you don't have to worry about that this evening. You just need to consider whether or not what's before you tonight is acceptable in planning terms.
Before you go to Linda, can I just make a comment on what Kath said?
Yes. Go, Councillor Heaney.
I'm going to make just a comment on what Kath said before we go to you. Is that all right, Linda? What I know that the village, Bradfield, didn't call it in because when they saw this coming up, the backland development, as I call it, because they thought it couldn't take place because the planning permission was in front for the two big houses, and they didn't call it in because they thought it can't take place because this planning permission is like this. So that's what I want to say about that. Sorry, Linda, I didn't.
Right. Councillor McWilliams.
Okay. If we go back to where we were starting from and looking at refusal, which I will support, with it being out of character with the current situation of the properties that are already in Windmill Road, I agree with that, and I agree with what Liz said about the benefits as well. And I'll say no more, but I will support that as a refusal.
Right. Nothing further. I'm going to ask, I think Councillor Gray proposed it.
Councillor Heaney and Councillor Holmes.
Right. So, and Councillor Heaney is the seconder of it. Right. So, you're looking at A9, A8, yes, yeah, I'm even confused now, A8, which really was purely and simply for building two bungalows in what was the rear of these two new houses. The proposal is that it should be refused. Those in favour of refusal, please show. And that is unanimous. Now, we now move on to A9, which we've discussed, but I'm still going to ask the officer to outline what A9 in itself is.
Right, so A9 is obviously linked to the decision that's just been made, and this application is the variation of condition 2 of the planning permission that related to the two dwellings at the front of Windmill Road. So in terms of what was approved is shown on the left of the slide. So that shows the two dwellings with the large gardens that have been under discussion and a single access point to there. This application proposes to vary it in, well, the original proposal in, I suppose, three main ways, is to allow, well, retrospective permission for the access to be put in relation to these applications, which results in a narrowing of the gardens, and also the shortening of the gardens to allow for the dwellings to the rear, which have just been refused. So that shows the ground floor plan in more detail, and I won't go through the photographs or that. So just to clarify that this application, points to consider under this application is the location of the access or basically the amendments from this plan to this plan, so it's the location of the access, the resulting narrowing of the gardens due to the access, and the shortening of the gardens to allow for dwellings to the rear of the site. Obviously, given the decision just made, that will affect the decision in terms of the shortening of the gardens, but what is under consideration also as part of this application is the access.
Right, and speakers, Mr. Hawley as the agent. Does he not wish to come forward on that one? Right, thank you, Mr. Hawley. So, councillors, it's been spelt well out for you. This one is to consider the shortening of the gardens and the establishment of the roadway. Now, if you refuse this one, which we have done already in the sense that we don't want any further buildings in their back gardens, then you have to refuse both the roadway and the shortening of gardens. That's my understanding. I'm sure I'll be corrected, which would then mean a separate application will have to come in for the establishment of the roadway. Am I reading that correctly? I turn to my officers.
Yeah, sorry, we were just debating whether there's any way to have a split decision so that approval could be granted for the access tonight, but actually because the application site is foreshortened, I don't think that's possible. It would have to just be refused, I think. I don't think there's a way to split the decision to get the outcome.
I think the advice from our solicitor is it's not possible, but I'm going to ask it.
It's more of a planning. No, they wouldn't normally.
Chair, so I think your summary was correct. I think that committee would either approve it because it's acceptable or refuse it, leaving the applicant the opportunity to come back and resolve it by retaining the full-size gardens, but including the access.
Linda's desperate.
Yes. Councillor McWilliams?
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to say, with that bit of discussion going on there, we agreed that it was out of character, and basically because that was reducing the size of the gardens and changing the houses, and it would have been out of character to the rest of Windmill Road, and that's how I feel that we should now progress. And I move that we refuse on that ground, on the similar grounds to the previous application. And I think that's the only way that we can actually resolve it.
I'll second it.
Yeah. I'll have a proposer and a seconder. Before I take the vote, any further comments from anybody? None? I don't think... I think you've got all the reasons as outlined. Right, those in favour of refusal of A9, so I get the number right. It's been well and truly chanted up. Those in favour, please show for refusal. That is unanimous again. Right. Thank you very much. That is refused, and I think that brings us to the end of the agenda for tonight. Before I go right back to the agenda, make sure there's no extra notes on it, and I don't think there is. No, that is the end of the meeting for this evening. Thank you very much.
Absolutely freezing. I don't know whether like to wait. I'm just really cold.
We better... Oh, Zoe, I'm going to call Zoe in, I should think. You're back.
Yeah, leave her in room 34.